American Comics. My universe begins from the inner world. Chapter 61. Although Tony's statement was a bit extreme, Lin still nodded in agreement. The mastermind guided people to establish Lin as a symbol, beautifying him through the internet into a god of the new era, and then guided people to pull him down from his pedestal. Finally, whoever could truly destroy this former god would be able to step on this god's corpse and ascend to godhood once more. But what those people didn't know was that by sending away a false god, they would usher in a true god. Son of Zeus, Lin. Sounds pretty good. At that time, those people's expressions would surely be priceless. Lin narrowed his eyes, a hint of a smile flashing through them. However, after the Lin symbol was destroyed, it would be his turn, right? To make a move against him. A cold glint flashed in Lin's eyes. Tony, give them a hand. What? Tony looked at Lin in shock. Lin shrugged and said with a smile, aren't they going to destroy this symbol? Speed it up a bit, I can't wait. Tony opened his mouth, then said, alright, suit yourself. More than that, I'm curious how they plan to destroy that symbol. Lin stroked his chin, muttering curiously. Jarvis. Pull up all the information that was previously blocked for him. Tony said grumpily, unable to help but whisper, if I had known you had this in mind, I wouldn't have wasted my time. Wasted time. No, you've helped a lot. Lin looked at Tony gratefully. In 1 week, the amount of faith power collected by the inner world was terrifying. A light screen appeared in front of Lin, and Jarvis projected news and information onto it. Lin, the Black Doctor of mutant criminals. Lin is a mutant. Lin actually did that for the mutants. A symbol of courage. Hypocritical Lin. Lin looked at the news headlines and the dirty water being splashed on him, and couldn't help but gasp. Isn't it disgusting? Tony said indifferently, the media that slandered me back then was much more vicious than these. No. Lin said with a strange expression, I want to thank him. Isn't this equivalent to positive publicity within the mutant community? Such a good thing exists. Tony was stunned. Lin chuckled and said to Tony, I almost forgot about the main business, let's not talk about this anymore. Main business. Tony looked at Lin with interest. Lin grabbed Tony without explanation, smiling, I'm taking you somewhere. The next moment, before Tony could refuse, he grabbed Tony and pulled him into the inner world, several kilometers away from the mutant gathering place. Choosing the location after entering the inner world was also one of the new abilities gained after the inner world upgraded. What is this place? Tony looked around curiously, guessing, you have new abilities. Teleportation. Haven't you been here several times already? Lin said with a smile. Tony paused, then said in surprise, this is the small world you call a sanctuary. Yes. Lin nodded. Yes. Is this right? Tony raised his voice, excitedly saying, the last time I came in, this place wasn't even as big as my house, and now it's this big. It should be about 8,000 square kilometers. Lin said casually, and seeing Tony's eyes widen, he felt a surge of satisfaction. Not many things could surprise Tony Stark. 8,000 square kilometers. At least 6 times larger than New York. Tony murmured, then couldn't help but complain, so you're here to show off that you're about to become the biggest farmer in the world. I don't have any slaves to give you. Lin's eye twitched, and he suddenly sighed. Alas, I originally wanted to give you permission to enter and exit the sanctuary, to see if you were interested in building a base or something here, but now it seems. Hey, I am. Tony quickly interrupted Lin, extremely interested. He paused, coughed lightly, then pouted, since you've said so, how can I not build it? He looked as if Lin was begging him. Lin didn't mind, he just stroked his chin and mumbled in a voice just loud enough for Tony to hear, it's a pity there's nothing here, not even the energy problem has been solved. Tony's mouth twitched, and he glared at Lin grumpily. You could have just said you wanted me to be responsible for building the energy system. So, you agree? Tony nodded, excitement flashing in his eyes. He had already thought of the benefits of building a base here. Summoning battle suits at any time, even an Iron Legion, and being able to hide here in times of danger. Lin curled his lips, and said seriously, then the city's energy system is entrusted to you. City. Tony thought he had misheard. He stared at Lin incredulously, putting his hand to his ear, say that again. City, I plan to build a city here. Lin said indifferently, and before Tony could speak, he told Tony about taking in mutants and building a mutant city here. After listening, Tony was silent for a few seconds, then suddenly said, Son of Zeus, you want to be the god of mutants. They do see me that way now. Lin nodded, and said to Tony with a smile, What, heard it's about mutants, so you want to go back, wash up, and go to bed. No. Tony muttered with a strange expression, I just suddenly understood why you said you wanted to thank that mastermind earlier. Lin smiled and said to Tony, So, your answer. Tony let out a long breath and said to Lin, If it's you, I'm willing to help you. Aren't you afraid that after I succeed, I'll lead the mutants to conquer the entire world? Lin narrowed his eyes, revealing an evil smile. Oh, come on, kid. Tony glanced at Lin, and said proudly, Who is in front of you? One of the smartest people in the entire world. I don't believe that someone who owns a world that can grow would be interested in Earth. My investment is guaranteed to make a profit. A glint of a smile flashed in Lin's eyes. He flicked Tony lightly, and after a light spot representing the freedom to enter the inner world landed between Tony's eyebrows, he told Tony some important points about entering the inner world. Tony listened and said it was no problem at all. Tony asked anxiously, Are we done? He was already eager to make a perfect construction plan. Let me introduce you to the first batch of mutants who entered here. Lin said to Tony, and after getting Tony's agreement, he took Tony to the mutant gathering place and introduced Tony to the mutants. Because he was brought by Lin, their god, even though Tony was the famous Iron Man, the mutants quickly accepted Tony. And after hearing that Tony would help build the town, the mutants' impression of Tony improved even further. After greeting Raven and Logan, whom he had met before, Tony and Lin hurriedly left the inner world together. Are you done? If you're done, hurry up and leave, don't delay my work. Tony said to Lin dismissively, and before Lin could leave, he rushed into his workshop. Lin shook his head amusedly, put away the golden battle suit that was placed aside, and quickly left Stark Tower. The next day, it was sunny. Lin's biological clock, developed over many years, made him wake up promptly at 7 o'clock. As he walked out of the bedroom and past the kitchen, he saw the king of the gods preparing breakfast. Dad, less sugar. Lin called out, then quickly walked into the bathroom. The change is so obvious. Lin felt the power of faith flowing into his inner world continuously decreasing. Although he had anticipated this situation, his mouth still twitched slightly when he felt the speed of the loss. Sure enough, this kind of artificially created false god cannot last long. Lin murmured to himself, closed his eyes, and sensed the situation in his inner world. Raven had already left the inner world, she must have gone to procure resources. Logan had selected several mutants with good abilities and was training them using the Saints' training methods. Hank was still making plans, while other mutants were doing the basic work Hank had assigned. Besides that, what surprised Lin was Tony. That guy actually brought all the Iron Man suits he had made into the inner world and was using them to build an energy system. Doesn't this madman ever rest? Lin couldn't help but mumble, spitting out the toothpaste in his mouth. Lin, come eat. Zeus called out from outside. Coming. Lin quickly finished washing up and walked quickly to the dining room. According to your habit, I put in very little sugar. Zeus smiled and placed a plate of pancakes in front of Lin. Lin took a bite, his eyebrows raising slightly. Delicious. He looked at Zeus and teased, Dad, you wouldn't happen to have a culinary authority, would you? No, that thing is useless. Zeus said with a faint smile, then continued, there are 6 days left until your authority star appears in the sky of Olympus. The gods of Olympus will investigate the situation immediately. How prepared are you? Lin raised an eyebrow and smiled, you should be worried about those who come. So confident. Zeus looked at Lin in surprise. He had been closely following Lin during this time, and he naturally knew about the Lin incident on the internet. So, he guessed that Lin wanted to become a superhero and use the power of the Avengers to deal with the gods of Olympus. But as far as he knew, starting yesterday, Lin's image had begun to slowly collapse amidst a large number of negative comments and news, transforming from a superhero into a mutant conspirator reviled by everyone. With such an identity, would the Avengers still help him? Zeus couldn't help but remind him, Lin, don't put your hope in others. A person must ultimately rely on himself. What is this old man thinking? Could he possibly think that he was trying to hook up with other Avengers, wanting to borrow their power? A thought flashed through Lin's mind, and he vaguely assented, changing the subject. Dad, you said my authority would condense into a star in the sky of Olympus. What is the special significance of this star? Zeus put down his cutlery and said with a faint smile, it's a record, a guide, and something for the Olympians to believe in, essentially confirming your identity. Faith. Another source of faith income. Lin's spirits lifted. But authority, he mused, and extended his hand to Zeus. Zeus looked at Lin in confusion, and after a moment of thought, placed his hand on Lin's, giving it a light squeeze. Son, keep up the good work. Lin's mouth twitched, and he unhappily slapped his father's hand away, saying, authority. Didn't you give it all? Zeus's face darkened, and he pointed to his nose. Me. I'm Mike Crete now. What can a mortal give you? Lin squinted at Zeus, looking as if his dad was utterly useless. Zeus, somewhat exasperated, slapped the table and angrily said, authority is a manifestation of your talent, it has little to do with me. Lin asked in confusion, but as the king of the gods, your bestowal would strengthen and consolidate, and you could even grant new authorities, couldn't you? Zeus's expression froze. He could not only bestow but also seal, and even strip authorities that were not innate talents. But, he looked at Lin with heartache. I am just a mortal now. Hey. Lin smiled at Zeus, with the exact same expression Zeus had just worn. You don't really think I can't feel it, do you? After breaking through the sixth sense, Lin could perceive the existence of the cosmos and the energy fluctuations emitted by others. Zeus's heart twitched, but he sighed, alas, what can I, an exiled god, have? And even if I could bestow, what authority could I still bestow upon you? He mumbled, counting on his fingers. Strength, wisdom, light, fire, all these combat-related things have been distributed. Even poetry, music, sculpture, art, all these miscellaneous things are gone too. Zeus paused, then suddenly said, I've got it. Lin's spirit perked up. How about bestowing upon you the title of Lord of the Lavatory, with the authority of cleanliness? Zeus looked at Lin with shining eyes, then hastily added, I'll bestow it upon you once I return to Olympus. Lin's mouth twitched wildly, no need. This is the consequence of having too many children. There isn't enough family property to go around. However, return to Olympus. Why does it sound like he can return whenever he wants? His old man definitely had a trick up his sleeve, perhaps even 2, 3, 4, or 5. Seeing Lin silent, with a thoughtful expression, Zeus felt a little uneasy. Having nothing at all did seem a bit unfair. He cleared his throat and said, although there isn't a suitable authority, I can still grant you a blessing to strengthen your talent. He gently placed his hand on Lin's head. But a few seconds later, he suddenly opened his eyes wide. Enhancement failed. What talent have you awakened, exactly? He looked at Lin in shock. He had never asked Lin before. Lin blinked, asking in confusion, how would I know? I'm just the son of the mortal Mike Crete. Zeus. Lin chuckled, ate the last bite of his pancake, and happily walked towards the door. Crete Clinic had started operating 10 days ago, and he had to go to work. Son, I've already started the retirement process, I'll be retired in a few days. Congratulations. Lin called out, pushed open the door, and disappeared from Zeus's sight. Half an hour later, at Crete Clinic. Lin pushed open the clinic door and, seeing May Parker, the excellent employee who had arrived early, smiled and nodded at her. May, morning. Dr. Lin, good morning. May Parker quickly responded, her gaze at Lin a little strange. Why are you looking at me like that? Do I have something dirty on me? Lin asked in confusion, looking down at his clothes. No, these were the clothes he had changed into this morning. May Parker walked up to Lin, lowered her voice, and asked, Dr. Lin, are you the hero, Lin? Are you that hero, Lin? May Parker asked, a hint of excitement in her voice. If she had previously thought that the hero, Lin, was just a namesake, then the information that came out yesterday about the hero, Lin, helped her confirm it her boss was the hero, Lin. After all, the black doctor who treated mutants, that specific detail was too strong a pointer. Anyone who had been treated by Lin would likely connect it to Lin. Lin looked surprised, exclaiming, "Hero Lin. The same name as me. What a coincidence." May Parker looked at Lin speechlessly and whispered, "Your acting is too fake." "Is it?" Lin mumbled, stroking his chin, then said, "Right, after all, the name, Lin, has been very famous recently, I should have known." "So that means, you really are that." May Parker looked at Lin with pleasant surprise. "Shish." Lin winked at May Parker and said seriously, "Ms. Parker, it's time to work." "All right, Dr. Lin." May Parker looked full of excitement, as if she had learned a huge secret. Lin chuckled and strode towards the consultation room. After May Parker placed a cup of coffee on Lin's desk, Lin began his busy day. That day, every patient, upon seeing Lin, did not first ask about their condition, but rather about Lin's identity. To this, Lin merely smiled, neither denying nor admitting. But what was interesting was that all the patients, upon leaving, would give Lin grateful looks and express that they would always support him, even if Lin was a mutant. Among these patients, there were humans and also mutants. But relatively speaking, the mutants' attitude towards him was more fervent. After seeing the last patient, Lin let out a long breath and stretched. Crete Clinic only sees 50 patients a day, without appointments or regard for identity, only based on the time of arrival at the clinic and the urgency of the condition. In special circumstances, those who haven't been seen will be carried over to the next day. Therefore, Crete Clinic has always had a good reputation. Especially within the special group of mutants, Crete Clinic, which treats mutants equally, is like the white moonlight in their hearts. And now, with the added halo of the hero, Lin, Mutant Lin, the effect on mutants couldn't be better. Lin left the consultation room and looked at the still busy May Parker, saying with an apologetic expression, "May, you've worked hard." May Parker sighed deeply and said to Lin once again, "Lin, we really should hire a few more people. I'll keep an eye out. If you have suitable candidates, you can bring them to me for an interview." Lin said, nodded to May Parker, and quickly left the clinic. For Lin, the clinic work was just leisure, the next task was the real main event. After leaving the clinic, Lin returned home, closed his eyes, and sensed the state of his inner world. Tony was not in the inner world, a batch of resources had appeared, Hank had completed the plan. A glint of joy flashed in Lin's eyes, and with one step, he entered the inner world, appearing in the mutant gathering place within the inner world. At this time, the sky in the inner world had completely darkened. The mutant gathering place was covered with tents of various sizes, and a huge bonfire burned in the center of all the tents. The mutants gathered around the bonfire, either eating dinner or talking quietly, and the atmosphere seemed very harmonious. What touched Lin was that a flame flickered in everyone's eyes. Watching this scene, a smile unconsciously appeared on his lips. Mr. Lin, you're here. Have some of this. It's so good to see you. Upon seeing Lin appear, all the mutants' gazes fell upon him. Lin nodded to the crowd and smiled, "Tomorrow will be even better." Smiles appeared on everyone's faces, and some even shouted excitedly, "This is all your grace." "Yes. You brought us hope. My God Lin, I wish to serve you all my life." Seeing the crowd grow increasingly excited, Lin smiled slightly and calmed their emotions. Just then, Hank ran over, holding a notebook. "Mr. Lin, I'm done." He shouted excitedly at Lin, presenting the results of his day and night of hard work to Lin. Lin glanced at the inner world planning map and praised, "Very good." There were mountains and water, rivers and lakes, residential areas, as well as breeding areas, planting areas, and so on. Overall, it was still a plain terrain, but it had become richer and more reasonable. Even more remarkably, this planning map was only a part of a larger planning map. Even if the inner world continued to expand in the future, this area would not need any changes. Hank smiled happily. Although it was just a simple compliment, he felt as if his fatigue had disappeared. Mr. Lin, can that lake be moved to another place?" Hank pointed to the lake of faith not far away. "I'll figure out a way for this lake." A thoughtful look flashed in Lin's eyes, then he slowly closed his eyes. The power of faith began to be consumed, and the entire world seemed to be kneaded and reshaped by an invisible giant hand. A moment later, under the stunned gaze of the crowd, mountains, rivers, and lakes appeared in sequence, making this world even richer. And before they could recover, the ground beneath their feet trembled violently again. Then, they saw that the land where the Lake of Faith was located actually flew up. It was as if an invisible hand had dug it up and then sent it into the sky, turning it into a floating island in midair. They gaped, feeling their worldview utterly shattered. This is a miracle, this is a miracle. Hank shouted excitedly. Hearing Hank's words, everyone came back to their senses and shouted excitedly together. Miracle! Miracle! Lin! Lin! God! God! Lin looked at the fervent crowd and said loudly, "From today onwards, this world will be called the Sanctuary." The shouts of the crowd paused, then they roared in unison. Sanctuary! Sanctuary! Long live the Sanctuary! Long live the Lord of the Sanctuary! Long live my God! Everyone was extremely excited, they had witnessed a historic moment. Lin listened to the cheers of the crowd, looked at the island of faith in midair, and a look of surprise flashed in his eyes. At this moment, hot crystals of faith were falling into the lake of faith. Then, as if melting, they merged with all the crystals of faith in the lake of faith. The next instant, a sapling carved like a golden crystal appeared in the lake of faith, radiating dazzling light. Lin's spirit was invigorated, and he felt as if the entire sanctuary had become even more vibrant. Was that the spirit of the sanctuary? Olympus, the city of all might. This is where the gods of Olympus reside. It floats in the Olympus dimension, appearing like a brilliant star from afar. As the distance closed, it became clear that the city of All Might was a massive, ring-shaped metropolis formed by several mountains clustered together. Within this enormous city, the architecture was whimsical, with various magnificent buildings combining to form architectural clusters like small islands. These clusters were spread across the ground and sky, yet connected by passages or light bridges to form a cohesive whole, appearing dreamlike at a glance. At this moment, above Olympus, Lin's star of authority was coalescing. This star of authority had attracted significant attention since it began to form. Only those granted power by Zeus, the king of the gods, or those with Zeus's direct bloodline, would see a star of authority appear above Olympus. But, it had been a long time since a star of authority had appeared. The sudden appearance of this star of authority naturally drew a lot of attention, and everyone was curious about its master, waiting for the star to be born and unveil the mystery of its owner. At this moment, below the Olympus temple, a dignified and beautiful goddess, dressed in an ancient Greek-style white robe, was looking up at the star of authority in the sky. Her bright eyes flickered, and she quickly left the temple, heading towards the dimensional center of Olympus. Although she didn't yet know who the master of that star of authority was, it was definitely on Earth. She needed to go to Earth to see. Before anyone else, there were still 4 days until the star of authority fully coalesced. Over these 2 days, Raven used her abilities to transform into different appearances, acquiring a large amount of resources, providing strong assurance for the construction of the sanctuary. And with the efforts of the mutants and Tony's help, significant changes appeared within the sanctuary. In just 2 days, the outline of a small town emerged. The various abilities of the mutants, coupled with the tireless Iron Man suit, made the construction efficiency remarkably fast. However, if Iron Man's fans knew that the Iron Man suit was being used to carry bricks, their expressions would surely be quite something. Aside from the changes in the sanctuary, Lin, the symbol representing heroism, courage, and similar meanings, had almost completely collapsed over these 2 days. The superhero, Lin, once praised by people, had become a mutant criminal who damaged the military's image, stirred up animosity between the military and civilians, and attempted to incite chaos. This situation caused Lin to lose a significant amount of faith power income. Fortunately, Lin had anticipated this situation and had accumulated a large amount of faith power. As long as he didn't use it to expand his inner world, he wasn't currently lacking in faith power. Moreover, the faith power from the mutant community was rapidly increasing, so Lin was not worried. In addition, Crete Clinic had undergone a noticeable change. Even though Lin had never admitted to being the hero, the proportion of mutants coming to the clinic had been steadily increasing over these 2 days. The occurrence of this situation was inevitable, so Lin didn't mind. But when he arrived at the clinic this morning, he found that people had gathered around it, and from their expressions, it was clear they weren't there to see a doctor. Was it an anti-mutant group? Lin raised an eyebrow and walked into the clinic without a care. The moment those people saw Lin, they immediately rushed forward. You fooled mutant. You criminal. All mutants should die. Disgusting monster. Those people followed Lin, yelling insults. Lin's expression didn't even change. This level of cursing was completely harmless, even making him feel like laughing. You heartless quack. Lin paused, smiling as he looked at the woman who had just spoken, and a terrifying pressure quietly emerged, causing these people to close their mouths in fear. Lin, however, smiled and gestured with his hands, recited a few lines of the multiplication table in Chinese, wrote a Chinese character in the air, and then pointed it at the woman from a distance. The next instant, the woman's face turned pale, and she screamed in terror. Ah! I've been cursed by this mutant. Lin subtly flicked his finger, and a speck of golden light landed on the woman's abdomen. Immediately, the woman clutched her stomach and began to vomit profusely, as if struck by an invisible fist. Seeing this, the faces of the surrounding people changed, and they quickly distanced themselves. A smile appeared on Lin's face, and he quickly walked towards the woman. Madam, it seems you need help. No, don't come over. The woman retreated in terror. I am a doctor, don't be afraid. I'm here to save you, and I'll send you the bill. No. You are a demon. The woman ran, vomited, and screamed all at once. Truly gifted, Lin raised an eyebrow, swept his gaze indifferently over the others, and made a few gestures with his hands, causing those people to turn and run in terror. This mutant can curse. A cursing quack. Help. Mommy. Lin shrugged and strode into the clinic, only to see May Parker looking at him fearfully. Dr. Lin, can you really curse? May Parker nervously swallowed. Lin chuckled, saying helplessly, if I could curse, we'd be rich by now. May Parker sighed in relief, then excitedly said, can you teach me that trick you used to scare them? Lin looked at May with amusement. Let's start today's work first. Okay. Dr. Lin. May Parker responded, as usual, first bringing Lin a cup of coffee, then began her busy day. Today, there were more mutants among the patients, including 2 mutants whose appearances had mutated. However, although their appearances were somewhat frightening, they seemed very insecure, and they were very grateful to May Parker for her friendly reception. The good news was that today's patients all had minor ailments. I can leave on time, maybe I can take Peter to see a movie. May Parker had already planned her evening after work. Just as the number of patients was dwindling, Dr. Help. The sudden cry for help startled May Parker. A mutant with yellowish-green skin rushed into the clinic, carrying a person covered in blood and already unconscious. May Parker had no time to lament having to work overtime and immediately went to meet him. Sir, don't worry, I'll take you to the doctor now. May Parker comforted the other party. Thank you. The mutant said gratefully, following May Parker into the examination room. Dr. Lin. Emergency. May Parker said anxiously. Gunshot wound, excessive blood loss. Lin quickly glanced at the injured person, then immediately stood up and said, take him to the operating room. Inside the operating room, Lin was examining the injured patient on the operating table. How did he get injured? The mutant with yellow-green skin hesitated, then, seeing Lin's brows furrow, gritted his teeth and said, it was someone from Sentinel Services. Sentinel Services. How did you provoke them? Lin asked curiously. Seeing the mutant stammer, he turned to May Parker and said, you let the other patients leave first. I'm going to make a call. There were mutants among the remaining patients. Most of Sentinel Services agents harbored deep hatred for mutants. They didn't care if you were innocent or not. As long as a mutant was taken back to Sentinel Services, none of them would be considered innocent. May Parker was stunned, her face showing indignation as she said, are they going to cause trouble again? This is a clinic. They keep acting so recklessly. Crete Clinic had experienced this kind of thing more than once, but the frequency had clearly increased recently, especially yesterday, when they came twice in one day. May, hurry up, they should be here soon. Lin said calmly, then took out his phone to call his soon-to-retire father. After that, he walked into the operating room. Dr. Lin, please operate quickly. He's about to lose consciousness. The yellow-green mutant urged anxiously. No rush, he won't die. Lin said leisurely, and once again examined the injured person's blood-stained face. He hadn't noticed earlier, but now he looked somewhat familiar. Lin's eyes flickered with thought as he asked, "Tell me your names." The yellow-green skinned mutant's expression changed, and he angrily said, "Are you a doctor or police? Hurry up and operate." Lin smiled, walked over to the injured person, casually tore open the man's clothes, and examined the wound between his ribs. Blood was still continuously flowing from the wound because of the bullet inside, which was also why he had fainted. The next moment, under the terrified gaze of the toad, Lin directly plunged his hand into the wound. Instantly, blood gushed out unrestrainedly. "What are you doing?" Accompanied by a cry of alarm and anger, the toad opened his mouth, and his tongue shot out like a python, coiling around Lin's neck. Lin's eyes flashed, and a shield formed of golden light blocked the tongue. Seeing this, the toad exclaimed in surprise, "You are indeed a mutant too." Lin ignored him, his fingers fumbled in the wound, and he found the bullet. "Hidden quite deep." Lin muttered, and directly pulled out the bullet. A specially made ceramic bullet. Of course. An ordinary bullet wouldn't have injured this person. Lin glanced at it and casually tossed the bullet onto the medical tray. PFF'd. Another spurt of blood came out. The toad watched this scene and furiously pounced on Lin. No matter how good Dr. Lin's reputation was among mutants, he had never seen an operation performed like this. This scoundrel was trying to kill someone. Lin raised an eyebrow, and the golden light forming the shield suddenly shattered. The flying specks of light coalesced, wrapping around the toad like a rope, restraining him in place. This was holy light. It was light, but not pure light. It was more like an energy similar to light, with light's heat, yet possessing a sacred attribute. This was part of the ability Lin had awakened after breaking through to the sixth sense. Lin could freely control this energy, using it not only for healing but also for defense and attack, and even to strengthen himself and others. The toad glared furiously at Lin, roaring, "What do you want to do? Are you trying to kill?" His shouts abruptly stopped. Because he saw that after Lin's hand, glowing with holy light, gently stroked the wound actually healed at a visible speed. Lin snapped his fingers, and the holy light restraining the toad dissipated into specks of light. "Can you tell me your names now?" In fact, when Lin saw the toad's tongue, he already had the answer regarding the identities of these two. The toad got up from the ground and patted away non-existent dust from his body. "Thank you so much. The Brotherhood will not forget your kindness." The Brotherhood. It was indeed that man. The toad smiled slightly. "They all call me Toad. As for him, he is our leader, Eric Lenscher." "It really is Magneto." Lin sighed. Indeed. Did this person know their leader? The toad looked at Lin in confusion, then suddenly chuckled, "Magneto. He should like that nickname very much." Lin's eyebrow twitched slightly. So, Magneto, one of the original mutant leaders, was now just a young man a few years older than him. No wonder he had never heard of Magneto's heroic deeds. It turned out the nickname Magneto didn't even exist yet. "Dr. Lin, when will he wake up?" the toad asked anxiously. "Tomorrow at the latest," Lin said casually. The toad breathed a sigh of relief and thanked Lin again. Lin suddenly said, "You should go." The toad was stunned, his expression becoming serious. "Sentinel services." Lin nodded. "They should be here soon." The toad tilted his head in confusion. "Dr. Lin, with your abilities, they shouldn't be your match, right?" A cold glint flashed in his eyes, and he said with murderous intent, "How about we work together and eliminate all of Sentinel Service's people?" Lin looked at the toad as if he were an idiot, pointing to the ground and then to the ceiling. "This is my clinic. Fighting on his territory. Was he crazy?" His new clinic had only been open for a few days. Besides, this was Freya's clinic. If it were destroyed due to a fight, Freya would be angry. The toad was startled, then recalled the rumors of Hero Lin from the past 2 days, and nodded in understanding. If Dr. Lin were to act, it would confirm the recent Lin is a mutant fact. Given Sentinel Service's increasingly tough and aggressive stance towards mutants, once they knew Dr. Lin was a mutant, they would definitely raze this clinic to the ground. Dr. Lin didn't want to destroy the clinic, he must want to save more mutants. A thought flashed through the toad's mind, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of reverence for Lin. "Once Eric wakes up, we will definitely come to visit you again. By then, Eric would definitely be able to persuade Dr. Lin to join the Brotherhood. Looking at the Toad's expression, Lin's face was peculiar. He wouldn't want me to join the Brotherhood, would he? You take him out, Lin said, then walked out of the operating room. After the Toad carried Magneto out of the operating room, Lin threw some medicine to the Toad. With Eric on his back, the Toad's hands were occupied, but he shot out a long tongue, wrapped it around the medicine, and pulled it over. After stuffing the medicine into his pocket with his agile tongue, he gratefully said to Lin, Dr. Lin, this will be your treatment fee for this time. He used his tongue to take out a palm-sized white paper bag and flicked it into Lin's hand. Lin looked at the packaging, which was often seen in street alleys, and his eye twitched. This stuff, it wouldn't be flour, would it? You. Watching the Toad, who had already left, Lin swallowed the words in his mouth. He opened the paper bag and glanced inside, his expression slightly stunned. What is this? Looking at the black chip in his palm, Lin's eyes flashed with confusion. Who are you people? You can't come in. This is a clinic. What do you want? If you scare the patients, we will definitely sue you. This is illegal trespassing. Help. Someone is assaulting me. May Parker, with disheveled hair, stood in front of the clinic entrance, shouting loudly, blocking several people in tactical vests from entering. Madam, please step aside. We are pursuing mutant criminals. Mutant criminals. May Parker sneered inwardly. She was an old employee of Crete Clinic and had seen too many innocent mutants, as well as many mutants persecuted by Sentinel services. She wouldn't just assume the two mutants were criminals based on that one sentence. There are no criminals here, and no mutants either. May Parker shrieked, completely abandoning her usual romantic and intellectual image. If her nephew saw her like this, that silly boy would surely be dumbfounded. May Parker chuckled inwardly, glaring at the Sentinel Services team. Without a search warrant, if you dare to break into the clinic, just wait for a lawyer's letter. At this moment, she had the imposing aura of a single woman holding the fort. Just as several Sentinel Services agents were hesitating, Jess Turner, their operations manager, walked up to May Parker with an expressionless face. Move. Jess Turner said impatiently, then added coldly, we don't have time to waste with you. Jess Turner was a Latino, and because his daughter died in a mutant conflict, he harbored a deep hatred for mutants. He was certain that those two maggots who had taken things from Sentinel Services would come here. And he also knew about Crete Clinic and about Lin. Simply put, he had no good feelings for this clinic or the people in it. No, you. May Parker's voice abruptly stopped. She watched him pull out a gun, a hint of fear appearing in her eyes. Get out. Jess Turner said coldly, pointing his pistol at May Parker's head. A hand gently pushed down Jess Turner's gun, and a tall figure stood in front of May Parker. Don't point a gun at my employee, she'll be scared. Lin smiled at the other party, but his eyes held a hint of coldness. Jess Turner looked at the smile on Lin's face and said coldly, disgusting mutant. Mutant. Where? Lin looked around in confusion, then looked at the agent in front of him, appearing to suddenly understand. Oh, you're talking about yourself. You fooled mutant. Jess Turner roared in anger, the cold barrel of the gun pointing at Lin's head. Get out of my way. Lin's smile remained unchanged, but the next second, Jess Turner felt a sharp pain in his stomach, and his pistol was flung to the side by an invisible force. Although the agents behind him couldn't see Lin's movements, they still unhesitatingly pointed their guns at Lin. But almost as soon as they made a move, they were struck down to the ground by a force, groaning in pain. Lin still looked like he was smiling, as if he had done nothing. His speed was too fast, so fast that even if he did something right in front of these people, they wouldn't be able to catch his movements at all. He just had a lot of things going on recently and temporarily didn't want to step on these mad dogs from Sentinel Services, which didn't mean he would be indifferent when their guns were pointed at him. Lin kicked their guns a short distance away and said to May Parker, who was beside him, May, you go first, I'll handle this here. May Parker nodded. She knew where Lin's confidence came from. She tidied her clothes and hair, and after accidentally stepping hard on Jess Turner's foot, she quickly departed, her high heels clacking. Lin grinned, amused by May Parker's actions, and silently counted down the time in his heart. The New York Police Department should be arriving soon, right? He had connections, so there was no need for fighting and killing. It wouldn't be good if the clinic's plants were damaged. Jess Turner endured the pain in his body, his face twisted as he looked at Lynn. You assaulted Sentinel Services agents, harbored mutant criminals, you are committing. You need to take responsibility for your words. Be careful, I'll sue you for defamation. Which I saw me attacking you. Lynn interrupted the other party's words, feeling pleased. Jess Turner was extremely frustrated because they indeed hadn't seen anything. Just then, he saw Lynn walk out of the clinic with a face full of fear. Jess Turner felt no joy, instead, he had a bad feeling. Sure enough, after Lynn rushed out of the clinic, piercing sirens blared, and in the blink of an eye, more than a dozen police cars appeared in front of the clinic, surrounding it. Help! They threatened to kill me. Lynn screamed in terror, striding over to George Stacy and whispering, Uncle George, thank you for your trouble. George Stacy sighed helplessly, but shouted into the clinic, listen, thugs inside, quickly surrender your weapons. Jess Turner watched this scene in anger. Thugs. Have you ever seen thugs lying on the ground? And, didn't you see the Sentinel Services cars outside? He struggled to get up from the ground, and with all his strength, he roared, we are Sentinel Services, we are pursuing mutant criminals. Hearing the shouts from inside, the police looked at George Stacy. George Stacy walked towards the clinic, looking at the Sentinel Services agents crawling on the ground like maggots, suppressing the urge to smile, and said coldly, this is just a clinic, there are no mutant criminals here. Jess Turner said, angry and frustrated, is this how you police do your job? We are just protecting citizen property. George Stacy stood his ground. The Latino agent took a deep breath, trying to control the pain in his abdomen as he stood up straight, and said in a low voice, you have no idea what those mutants stole. Even if we die here today, we must go in and search. George Stacy inwardly cried out that this was bad. If things continued like this, it would be difficult to resolve. Then let them search, but if anything is lost or damaged, you will have to compensate at the market price. Lynn said leisurely. Jess Turner glared fiercely at Lynn, then led several agents who had struggled to their feet into the clinic to search. A moment later, the group appeared at the clinic entrance. They certainly hadn't found anyone, but they weren't empty-handed. Jess Turner opened his palm, and a specially made ceramic bullet lay in it. Can you explain? A hint of a smile flashed in Lynn's eyes. It was good that they found it, his act wasn't in vain. Helping mutant criminals, abusing his father's authority, these are all things that the people behind the scenes want to see. Today should have shown enough, right? And Magneto's appearance was also a pleasant surprise. With his Man of the Hour status passively enhanced, the things stolen from Sentinel Services must be extraordinary. If Sentinel Services knew that he saved Magneto, would they guess that everything was orchestrated by him, that everything was the start of his counterattack? Sentinel Services is a department specially set up by the military, which is different from Stryker's personal research. Especially with Magneto having already obtained the key items, what would the military do? I've got leverage over you, and I've sent out some evidence. If you don't start the group battle, I will. In this situation, what would the military choose? Yes. From the very beginning, Lynn had guessed and was certain that the people behind the scenes were Stryker and the military. There might be other reasons, but Stryker was definitely the main mastermind. With all that happened today, the other side should be making their move soon, right? Don't disappoint me. A hint of anticipation appeared in Lynn's eyes. This matter must be resolved before the people from Olympus arrive. Only then will his false God image be completely destroyed, only then will he be subjected to scorn and curses, and only then will he rebound when his identity as the son of Zeus is exposed, breaking free from that abyss full of malice and transforming into a true God worshipped by people. Is there anything else to explain? Seeing that Lynn didn't speak, Jess Turner sneered. Lynn came back to his senses and smiled at Jess Turner. I just performed a minor rectal surgery and took something out of a man's rectum. Lynn spread his hands, his face full of helplessness, and said, you know, some men always fall in the shower and accidentally sit on something strange. You. Jess Turner trembled, pointing at Lynn, and angrily said, you're saying that Sentinel Services' special bullet appeared in a man's butt. Who would believe such nonsense? I do. George Stacy said without changing his expression. Our police have also retrieved fire extinguishers. Jess Turner. Lynn exclaimed, so that man was from your Sentinel services. How could our Sentinel services have such disgusting things? Jess Turner roared furiously. Oh. Lynn drew out his voice, saying meaningfully, so Sentinel services doesn't hire special groups. You're discriminating against them. You. Jess Turner's face turned red with anger, but he didn't know how to respond. Just then, George Stacy spoke. Since you've already searched and found nothing, then leave quickly. Hearing this, several Sentinel Services agents looked at each other, their gazes falling on Jess Turner. Staying any longer would only be self-humiliation. Jess Turner took a deep breath and said coldly, go. Lynn watched them leave with a smile, but as they stepped out of the clinic door, he called out to them, Mr. Agent, next time you come for rectal surgery with that souvenir, I'll give you a 20% discount. Jess Turner's lips twitched, and he almost dropped the bullet in his hand. Is it really a discount? An agent suddenly turned back and asked cautiously. Jess Turner's face turned crimson, and he glared fiercely at that agent, then quickly left, covered in embarrassment. George Stacy lightly patted Lynn's shoulder. Be careful, those people from Sentinel Services are a bunch of mad dogs. I know. Lynn nodded, smiling, thank you for your trouble, Uncle Stacy. George Stacy opened his mouth, looking as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. What's wrong? Lynn asked curiously. George Stacy said helplessly, as her brother, you should find time to rein in Gwen for me, she used to listen to you the most when she was little. What happened to her? Lynn asked curiously. Since the last time he arranged for the two little spiders to meet, he had only seen Gwen once, and that was when he encountered her on the outer wall of a building while returning home late at night. A look of helplessness appeared on George Stacy's face. Her teachers have already called me in for a talk recently because of her frequent tardiness and early departures. She should have her own things to do, right? Lynn said with a smile. Gwen has always been opinionated since she was a child. So, I suspect she has a boyfriend. A hint of anger appeared on George Stacy's face, and he immediately said to Lynn, no, as her brother, you must help me manage her. He paused, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. If you find out who her boyfriend is, you must tell me. Lynn smiled helplessly and saw George Stacy out of the clinic. Soon, more than a dozen police cars roared away. Lynn glanced into the distance, turned and returned to the clinic, directly closing its door. Then, a thought flashed through his mind, and he arrived in his inner world, appearing on the island of Faith in midair. At this point, the Lake of Faith could truly be called a real lake. Looking at the full body of water, Lynn felt a strong sense of security. Although the Lynn symbol was collapsing, and the incoming power of faith was greatly reduced, a small amount of the power of faith still flowed in every day, like the difference between a great river and a stream. Lynn didn't care about this situation. Anyway, it would return to its former state, even far surpassing it. What he cared about was the golden crystal tree in the Lake of Faith. It was formed from the pure and fervent faith crystals of his believers, and as the believers' power of faith increased, this golden crystal tree also grew continuously. From its original state as a small sapling, it grew into a slightly larger sapling. There are still too few believers. Lynn whispered, descending into the Lake of Faith and appearing beside the crystal tree's trunk. The moment he placed his hand on the trunk, he sensed a feeling of intimacy. This was the spirit of the sanctuary, born within this tree the moment the golden crystal tree appeared. If Lynn was the master of the inner world, then the spirit of the sanctuary was the will of the inner world, its core. The benefits to the inner world after the appearance of the spirit of the sanctuary were obvious. The spirit of the sanctuary would instinctively make this world more perfect according to Lynn's memories, and ensure its regular operation, making the inner world increasingly resemble the environment Lynn lived in. For example, now, the spirit of the sanctuary was perfecting the inner world's weather system. After a brief communication with the spirit of the sanctuary, Lynn left the Lake of Faith and looked down from above. The mutants were busy building the town, working hard for their future. Looking at the smiles on their faces, Lynn suddenly felt a peculiar sense of satisfaction in his heart. He didn't know if this was the feeling of a god, but if it was, not bad. The Pentagon, Department of Defense meeting room. Several high-ranking military officials were in the meeting room, fiercely discussing the hero, Lin. We've received new and authentic evidence from the Sentinel Task Force. If these two pieces of evidence are released and then manipulated, they can completely shred this mutant hero's reputation. Ha! With this enemy, our approval ratings have risen significantly. So, we can proceed to the next step. Now, we'll see Stryker's research results. At this point, the group looked at Stryker, who was sitting in the corner. Stryker nodded calmly. Leave it to me. And haven't you already seen that guy's power? When that guy was mentioned, the eyes of several high-ranking military officials first showed fear, then excitement. If this thing could be mass-produced, they would have a terrifying killing force. But not yet. The final test still needed to be conducted, and the command authority after this terrifying force was established needed to be carefully discussed. Then let's start the next phase of the plan and resolve this matter as soon as possible. As the Minister of Defense's voice fell, the meeting room became quiet. A moment later, after everyone had left, only Stryker and the Minister of Defense remained. Stryker stood up, walked behind the Minister of Defense, and lightly patted the Minister of Defense's shoulder. You performed well just now. The Minister of Defense nodded expressionlessly, but a hint of confusion appeared in his eyes. Seeing this, Stryker smiled, took a medical syringe from his jacket pocket, injected it into the Minister of Defense's neck, and pushed the liquid inside. And the moment the liquid was pushed in, the confusion in the Minister of Defense's eyes completely disappeared. It will be over soon, and you will be free again. Stryker said indifferently. The entire Lin hero incident was manipulated by him behind the scenes, and the other people in the military were merely his puppets. As long as someone raised an objection, he would have X-143 control that person, and then inject X-143 extract for long-term control. Currently, it seemed the effect was very good. Elevate the hero, Lin, to a godlike height, then let him fall heavily. During this period, the military would appear as a victim and gain a large amount of support. Finally, turn him into a terrifying mutant criminal, and after he causes extensive destruction, the military will resolve him in the posture of a savior. At that time, the military's approval ratings would not only rise to a new level, but the hatred and animosity towards the mutant group would also reach a new high, even completely turning them into enemies of humanity. Establishing a false, powerful, and ambitious enemy, or fabricating a threat, and then standing on the moral and righteous high ground to gain more support and military funding, has been the military's usual tactic. However, this was the first time such a tactic had been used on an individual. Stryker sighed inwardly and quickly left the meeting room. He had to make the final preparations. There were 3 days left until the condensation of authority and responsibility. Morning, continuous rain. Lin stood on the second floor of the clinic, looking at the clinic surrounded by people, a smile on his face. This world never lacked people who thought they were righteous, but in most cases, these people were merely tools, being used by others. So energetic, aren't they? He chuckled softly, closed his eyes, and felt the state of his faith power. Without surprise, the daily intake of faith power had drastically decreased again. Lin happily made himself a cup of coffee, sat by the window watching the crowd below, and took out his phone to search for the latest reports on the hero, Lin. The evil mutant Lin cursed ordinary people. The mutant, Lin, colluded with the New York police. These 2 news reports were full of malice. And most crucially, these 2 news reports also had clear videos, and the image of the hero, Lin, was exposed on the internet for the first time. Thus, this video became powerful evidence in people's eyes. Suddenly, people's anger was ignited, and the image of the hero, Lin, completely collapsed. Along with the collapse of his image, the internet was filled with condemnations of the hero, Lin. Various unrelated and chaotic things, guided by the mastermind behind the scenes, were all attributed to Lin. In just one night, Lin became an unforgivable mutant criminal attempting to subvert the world. Unlike before, because of the clear video in this incident, Lin's information was easily and completely dug up. His identity, profession, family, everything was unearthed and posted online. And when people learned that Lin's father was the director of the New York Police Department, there was an even greater uproar. For a time, not only Lin, but the New York Police Department also fell into a storm of public opinion, surrounded by a large number of protesters. People demanded that the mutant Lin be sanctioned and that the director of the police station also be arrested. Did all this really happen in one night? Lin couldn't help but laugh, then dialed a series of numbers and called May Parker. The call connected, and before May Parker could speak, Lin said, "May, don't come to the clinic these next few days. Come back to work after things settle down." "Lin, are you alright?" May Parker asked worriedly. She didn't believe the chaotic things online. She had known Lin and Lin's mother for a long time, and she only trusted her feelings over the years. "Don't worry," Lin said calmly, then hung up the phone. But just as he hung up, his phone rang again. It was his father. He answered the phone, and this time, before he could speak, Zeus's voice rang out. "Lin, are you alright over there?" "I'm fine," Lin said, then added helplessly. "It's you, though, you must have been implicated, right?" "Ha ha." Zeus laughed, his voice full of joy. "With all this going on, I retired a few days early." Lin put down his coffee cup and said helplessly, "Things at home should be bad. Don't go home for now. You don't need to worry about me. Just take care of yourself. Also, there are only 3 days left." Zeus reminded Lin, but in his heart, he was curious how Lin would handle Olympus in 3 days. "I remember." Lin responded calmly and hung up the phone. Then, the phone rang again. Another call. Lin raised an eyebrow, looked at the number, and immediately sat up straight to answer the phone. "Mom, are you alright? Do you need my help?" His mother's voice was uncharacteristically serious. Lin felt a warmth in his heart but smiled and said, "No, I can handle it." "Good." Freya responded, then quickly hung up the phone. Still so decisive. Lin smiled and shook his head, put his phone aside, looked at the crowd outside the clinic, and his eyes narrowed slightly. Crete Clinic. Enraged, justice seekers surrounded the clinic, blocking it off completely. They roared outside the clinic, cursed at Lin, and many had even secretly brought weapons. But they didn't dare to rush the clinic. Though they were angry, they were more afraid. After all, mutants, in their eyes, were terrifying monsters, and Lin, who was once a hero, was a monster among monsters. They didn't know if they would be attacked by Lin if they rushed into the clinic, as Lin was a formidable being capable of stopping a nuclear bomb. But as more and more people gathered, their courage grew. Until, smash! A crisp sound. A man hurled a stone at the clinic's door, creating cracks in the thick glass. The scene fell silent, as if waiting for a reaction from inside the clinic. The stone rolled on the ground until it came to a complete stop. The next second, people angrily rushed towards the clinic. But at that moment, figures emerged from the crowd, blocking the angry mob and stopping them. "What are you trying to do? This is a clinic. Dr. Lin saved my life. Dr. Lin is definitely not a mutant criminal. Dr. Lin is a good person. He's the only one who would save me. I won't allow you to go in. He saved my daughter." Though these people were few in number, at this moment, they displayed astonishing solidarity. They loudly defended Lin, trying to use their personal experiences to awaken those whose hearts were blinded by righteousness. Even more remarkably, among these people were mutants and humans, homeless individuals and housewives, elders and young punks. But at this moment, they all just wanted to protect the Crete Clinic. Lin, upstairs, watched this scene, his eyes full of surprise. He hadn't expected that at a time like this, people would still dare to come out and defend the clinic. And as for those people below, he didn't even remember their names. Lin's gaze was complex, and a feeling of unusual warmth rapidly spread through his heart. Suddenly, bang! Accompanied by a gunshot, a female mutant with feathers on her face clutched her chest and fell to the ground. The previously chaotic scene fell silent. "Die! Disgusting monster!" A roar came from the crowd, and the man aimed at another mutant and pulled the trigger again. The next instant, Lin abruptly appeared before him, catching the fired bullet in his hand. The strong wind generated by his high-speed movement blew a path through the dense curtain of rain, forcing the surrounding people back several steps. Instantly, there was no one left around the man. Looking at Lin before him, the man's eyes showed terror, and he fired several shots at Lin. After Lin waved his hand and caught all the bullets, His fingers flicked repeatedly, and the bullets flew towards the man's limbs. The man wailed as he fell to the ground, blood mixing with the rainwater and spreading across the ground. Watching this scene, the righteous people's eyes filled with terror, and they continuously retreated, putting distance between themselves and Lin. Lin flashed, appearing beside the mutant who had been shot in the chest, and placed his hand on her chest. Holy light emerged from his palm, falling upon the mutant's wound. In just a single breath, the mutant's wound healed, and she was saved from the brink of death by Lin. Witnessing this, everyone gasped in surprise. Thank you, Dr. Lin. The female mutant looked at Lin with gratitude. This was the second time Lin had saved her. I should be thanking you. Lin said softly, helping the woman up from the ground. He turned to the people behind him who were defending the clinic and him, and said loudly, thank you. Those people came to their senses, expressing their gratitude to Lin and gathering around him. Dr. Lin, we will protect the clinic. Yes, we believe you. You would never do such things. Lin listened to their words and sighed in his heart. So, it was the existence of these people that helped him anchor the good in humanity, preventing him from becoming Homelander. Although these people were few, not even 1% of those he had treated, it was already enough. It's very dangerous here, you all should go back. Lin said to the people, then turned to the righteous crowd and said coldly, get out. With his voice, a powerful oppressive force quietly appeared, falling upon those people. This was an application of Cosmo after breaking through the sixth sense. Mobilizing a trace of Cosmo's power could achieve this. Instantly, these people trembled, as if feeling a ferocious beast tearing at them, and they screamed and scattered. In just over 10 seconds, the previously noisy crowd disappeared. Seeing this, Lin turned to those behind him again and said, hurry and leave. It will become more and more dangerous here. But, Dr. Lin, you must also be in danger, right? That's right, let us stay and help. Will the clinic still be open? Facing these questions, Lin merely smiled slightly and said, give me some time, the clinic will still be open. Everyone smiled, and when they wanted to ask something else, Lin had already disappeared. Everyone looked at each other, and after confirming that no one would bother the clinic for now, they slowly disappeared into the rain. Lin, on the second floor of the clinic, watched these people leave, a smile appearing on his face. He had sent some more evidence to those people, they should be making their move soon, right? Lin chuckled, took a step, and entered his inner world. Meanwhile, in an apartment in Manhattan, Toad looked at the awakened Eric Lenscher and cheered happily. A trace of confusion flashed in Eric's eyes, and scenes from before he fainted surfaced in his mind. Brotherhood, Sentinel robots, battle, retreat, chip. Where's the chip? Eric exclaimed, leaping from the bed, and looked anxiously at Toad. Don't worry, I've kept it on me. Toad comforted Eric, pulling out a palm-sized paper bag from his pocket and handing it to Eric. Eric hastily tore it open and glanced inside, pouring the gold particles onto his hand, and looked angrily at Toad. This is the chip. Toad was also dumbfounded. I clearly remember putting the chip in. He patted his pocket, then his expression stiffened, and he whispered, oh no. I got them mixed up and gave the chip to Dr. Lin, who saved you, as payment. Dr. Lin. Eric was stunned for a moment. Is it Dr. Lin from the Crete Clinic? Yes. Toad nodded, and quickly said, he's also a mutant. I've seen his abilities, he's very powerful. Eric frowned. Tell me what happened. Okay. Toad responded, and recounted the events. Magneto. He gave me that nickname. Eric's eyebrow twitched slightly, highly satisfied with the nickname. A mutant ability that can heal, attack, and defend. He mused, then asked Toad, his current situation shouldn't be very good, right? That's right. Toad grinned, if we save him, we should be able to get him to join the Brotherhood. Eric's eyes flashed, and he shook his head, saying, he also saved me. Whether he joins the Brotherhood or not, I will help him. One morning, Lin looked at the latest hot news, a cold smile on his face. The conflict that occurred in front of the clinic yesterday had, without a doubt, become the latest evidence against the evil Lin. What he hadn't expected was that even with things as they were, the military and Stryker, as the masterminds, continued to slander him, guiding Lin's image towards an even more malicious and terrible direction. Explosions, fires, even a passerby being robbed, all could be linked to Lin, said to be at Lin's instruction. The most egregious incident was when a mutant clashed with a gang late at night, causing numerous innocent casualties, and left Lin's name at the scene. For a time, it seemed as if all bad things were linked to Lin. People were in a state of panic, their anger reaching its peak, and they strongly demanded that Lin be dealt with. Now, are they just waiting for the military to appear as heroes and then take me out? Lin chuckled, placed his phone aside, and quietly waited for the military's heroes to make their entrance. And this wait lasted 2 days. During these 2 days, under the guidance of the masterminds, people's hatred and animosity towards Lin and mutants continuously accumulated and fermented, like a volcano about to erupt, constantly building energy. The Crete Clinic was subjected to several attacks during these 2 days. But each time, when the angry crowds tried to destroy the clinic, Lin would drive them away. As a result, after people embellished and spread the stories of being driven away from the clinic, their fear of Lin grew even stronger, having completely demonized him. Lin didn't care about any of this. What he cared about was that the authority was about to be fully condensed, and tomorrow was the day Olympus's people would arrive. But the military's heroes had not yet appeared, which made him extremely displeased. You're really holding back, but if you don't act soon, you won't have a chance. Lin looked in the direction of Washington, his eyes flickering, then he let out a laugh. I'm a mutant criminal now, so acting a bit excessively is normal, isn't it? Besides, as a god, being bullied like this without any anger would seem too weak, wouldn't it? Lin smiled and shook his head. He still hadn't adapted to the identity of a god. If you don't start the fight, then I will. Lin murmured, flying outside the clinic. He glanced at the crowd surrounding the clinic, and a powerful oppressive force evenly fell upon everyone. As the crowd gradually became restless and was about to retreat in fear. Hey, foolish humans. Lin let out a soft chuckle, placed the Crete Clinic into the sanctuary, and then disappeared from everyone's sight with a whooshing sound. Witnessing this scene, the crowd was silent for a few seconds before erupting in fervent cheers. They had finally driven away the terrifying mutant criminal. And in an inconspicuous corner, Eric looked at the vanished Crete Clinic, a smile appearing on his face. Can this Dr. Lin also create illusions? He manipulated some metal to fly from the location of the Crete Clinic, but upon seeing the metal pass through without obstruction, he was startled. It really disappeared. He looked in the direction Lin had disappeared, a thoughtful expression in his eyes. That direction is Washington. Could this Dr. Lin be trying to hiss? Eric gasped at his crazy thought. It shouldn't be. Meanwhile, in Queens, New York, a dignified and beautiful woman in a white dress slowly walked along the street, occasionally casting curious glances around her. Athena hadn't been to Earth in a long time. Following her inner guidance, she chose Earth when she left the Olympus dimension. After wandering for 2 days, she arrived in this city. However, it feels more chaotic, she murmured inwardly. In just 2 days on Earth, she had witnessed many conflicts. And what interested her was superheroes. People now greatly admired so-called superheroes, and those superheroes reminded her of the gods of old. Suddenly, her heroic brows furrowed together, and an unpleasant feeling arose in Athena's heart. Some ill-intentioned gazes fell upon her, brazenly scrutinizing her, as if they wanted to strip off her clothes. Athena paused her steps, and as those few men approached her with delighted expressions, her bright eyes looked towards them. The next moment, a hazy light flashed in her eyes, and these approaching men began to fight each other. Athena glanced indifferently at those people, then continued walking down the street. She was not a cruel god, so this was just a small lesson. Just then, she saw a red and blue figure, pulling a web, descend from midair among those people, and in a few leaps, he used the web to hang those confused individuals. Is this a superhero? Athena watched the red and blue figure with interest, and after seeing him leave, her eyes flickered, as if she understood why superheroes were so popular. Just then, she suddenly remembered a name she had frequently heard during her day on Earth. Lin Crete. She learned from people's mouths that this man was a mutant, originally one of the superheroes people admired, but in a short time, he had become an object of people's hatred, a mutant criminal. From superhero to supervillain in a short time. A thoughtful look flashed in Athena's eyes. Although she didn't yet understand the sequence of events, she smelled a hint of conspiracy. When the development of an event deviates from its original trajectory, and especially when it goes from one extreme to another in a short period, such a development often indicates that someone can gain huge benefits from the entire matter. Hey! Athena's lips curved slightly, and a hint of curiosity arose in her towards the protagonist of this matter. And just as a hint of curiosity about Lin Crete emerged in her heart, a special feeling, or rather, a premonition, appeared in her mind. It feels like this trip will bring special rewards. Athena murmured, a unique sparkle appearing in her bright eyes. She took 2 quick steps and stopped a passerby. Where is Lin? The passerby stared at Athena for a moment, a look of astonishment flashing in his eyes, and immediately said enthusiastically, Lin. Are you talking about that evil mutant Lin? Athena nodded. Are you going to denounce him? The man guessed, and without waiting for Athena to speak, he muttered to himself, of course, you're so beautiful, if you go there and do a live stream, you'll immediately attract a lot of fans. He had heard that many people had successfully started their channels this way. Live stream, fans. Athena frowned, her eyes flickered, and she said, tell me. The passerby quickly told Athena the address of the Crete clinic and pointed her in the right direction. I'll go with you, it's too dangerous for you to go alone. Where are you? The Pentagon, the office building of the M-Nation's Department of Defense, is the center and symbol of the M-Nation's military power. Here, large and small matters are handled daily, determining the fates of many people. But today, Lin's appearance will determine the fates of many people here. Lin descended rapidly from a high altitude, so fast that it seemed as if he was pulling down the clouds from the sky, leaving a thin white line behind him. Boom! Lin landed in the central courtyard of the Pentagon. The moment his feet touched the ground, several cracks erupted from the surface. Is this a bit much for a greeting? Listening to the piercing alarm sound, Lin narrowed his eyes, looked at the people around him, and seeing their shocked expressions, he smiled slightly. Hello, I am Lin Crete. He greeted them politely, but the people in the courtyard retreated in terror. The name Lin has been known to everyone during this period, and those in the Pentagon hated the name Lin to the extreme. Because this person made them work overtime for several days and eat takeout for several days. And his appearance here now clearly wasn't just a simple greeting. The staff quickly retreated into the distance, and with the alarm, a large number of guards and soldiers swarmed in. This is the Pentagon, one of the most heavily guarded places in the entire world. Any anomaly would lead to the deployment of guards within tens of seconds to eliminate the threat. But the person who broke in today was Lin. Lin stood in place, waiting, observing the increasing number of soldiers with interest, and under his keen perception, the soldiers in the surrounding buildings were also clearly visible. His sixth sense told him that there was nothing that could threaten him yet. In the operations room of the Pentagon, officers with stars on their shoulders were furious. Too arrogant. Is he crazy? He must be eliminated. This is a provocation. Where is Stryker? Doesn't he have a secret weapon to deal with this person? Now is the time. Stryker is in his secret base. Contact him. Tell him to act as soon as possible. These generals, who were usually high and mighty, screamed hysterically like cats whose tails had been stepped on. From the moment Lin broke in, the Pentagon became a joke. They had to eliminate Lin, and do so swiftly and decisively, otherwise the entire M-Nation would become a joke. General Stryker says his reinforcements will arrive soon. That mutant is on the move. Eliminate him as quickly as possible. Angry roars echoed throughout the building. At the same time, Lin's voice also resonated throughout the central courtyard. Gentlemen, I know you are watching me. Lin smiled, his sharp gaze seemingly piercing through walls, stabbing into the eyes of everyone hiding behind screens. I'll give you a chance now, hand over Stryker, and I'll leave here, how about that? The entire central courtyard was silent, but inside the Pentagon, they were thoroughly enraged. Give them a chance. If they really did that, they would never be able to hold their heads high again. But Lin continued to speak. I know you care about appearances, but believe me, this is not shameful. Otherwise, you will experience true shame. No response. The next second, a bullet accurately shot towards Lin's head. The bullet's speed was very fast, almost 3 times the speed of sound upon leaving the barrel. The bullet hit its target almost before the gunshot reached anyone's ears. But, Lin raised his hand and caught the bullet. Seeing this scene, everyone gasped, and the soldiers who had already surrounded Lin couldn't help but show fear in their eyes. This was not something a person could do. Lin casually tossed the bullet aside. His palm hurt a little, but that was all. And this was without him activating the power of his Cosmo, merely relying on his powerful body and the defensive enhancement from his inner world. If he activated the power of his Cosmo, or even burned his Cosmo, his performance would be even more exaggerated. The firing of this bullet meant that a confrontation between the two sides was inevitable. And this was also Lin's purpose for coming here. The next instant, sniper bullets flew towards various vital points on Lin's body. Lin moved his feet, dodging the sniper bullets as if taking a leisurely stroll. But the next second, the soldiers in the central courtyard fired a storm of bullets at him. Da da da. Dense bullets shot at Lin from all directions, like a metal storm, intending to engulf Lin. Let's see how you'll dodge now. The people in the operations room held their breath, as if they had already foreseen Lin being torn apart by bullets. Lin's eyes flashed, and a brilliant but not blinding light erupted from his body like a solid substance, forming a thick barrier that protected him in the center. Holy light barrier. Immediately, the incoming bullets were blocked by the barrier as if they had plunged into concrete, and stopped abruptly around Lin's body as if a pause button had been pressed. Seeing this scene, the soldiers not only did not stop their attack, but continued to fire bullets out of fear. In just a few seconds, Lin was enveloped as if in a cocoon made of bullets. Lin reached out and grabbed a handful of bullets, and the holy light barrier quietly dissipated. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The bullets that had been trapped in the holy light barrier seemed to reactivate, falling from midair to the ground. Immediately, a pile of bullets appeared at Lin's feet. The next second, as a soldier was about to attack, Lin flicked his thumb, and a bullet he held in his hand flew towards that soldier, piercing through the opponent's palm. Swish, swish, swish. Lin's fingers flicked continuously. Each bullet he flicked out caused a soldier to cry out in pain. When Lin stopped, none of the surrounding soldiers dared to put their hands on their weapons anymore. Seeing this, Lin raised an eyebrow in satisfaction. Leave here, if you don't want to lose your lives. Lin said calmly to these soldiers. His purpose in coming here this time was not to kill. And too much killing would only make him, as a god, gain more awe and fear, not the power of faith he sought. He did not want to become a god who delighted in slaughter in the eyes of the world, as this would affect the output of the power of faith. Every soldier's life spared today would be proof of his mercy as a god. A merciful god often gains favor and the power of faith more easily than a cruel god. And mercy was the first component Lin built for his image as a god. The soldiers looked at each other, unsure of what to do. The fear in their hearts wanted them to retreat, but their duty as soldiers made them stand their ground. Just then, a small grenade flew towards Lin. Boom! A violent explosion occurred in the central courtyard. Dirt splattered everywhere, and a ball of fire engulfed the spot where Lin had been standing. But when the fire and smoke cleared, only a deep crater left by the explosion remained. There was no trace of Lin. The soldiers nervously searched for Lin's whereabouts, but then a calm voice sounded from midair. To attack me with bombs, isn't that a bit much? Lin said indifferently, looking at the soldier who had fired the grenade from a handheld launcher. The soldier flinched, immediately dropped his weapon, and raised his hands to Lin. Lin flicked his finger, and a point of light flew towards the soldier. Bang! The soldier was directly blasted away, spitting blood as he fell unconscious. The soldiers watched this scene, fear appearing in their eyes, and when Lin's gaze swept over them, they actually retreated several steps in terror. Hey! Lin chuckled lightly, his sharp gaze suddenly fixed on a direction within the building. That was precisely the conference room where the high-ranking officials were gathered. Instantly, the atmosphere in the entire conference room turned extremely cold, the air seeming to become a viscous liquid, making even breathing difficult for them. Is Stryker in there? Lin said calmly, and just as he was about to fly over, a new wave of attacks arrived. Sonic cannons fired intense sound waves, rippling through the air, blasting towards Lin from all directions. A toy to deal with the Hulk. Lin frowned slightly, his expression playful as he said, "This thing is useless against me." He instantly vanished from his spot, And at the same time, a golden glow appeared on his palm as he waved his hand at several armored vehicles that had appeared in the central courtyard. Whoosh! Arrows of light flew from his hand, tracing magnificent golden arcs in midair, landing on the sonic cannons. Boom! Boom! Violent explosions rang out, and the armored vehicles carrying the sonic cannons were destroyed. But the attack was not yet over. Beams of energy rays shot towards Lin at an extremely fast speed. Lin's eyes flashed, and a golden light shield quietly appeared, then quickly expanded, like a wall, blocking the first wave of energy rays for him, after which Lin suddenly disappeared from his spot. Chitauri energy weapons. Unless it was elevated to the level of a cannon, it would be somewhat useful against him, and that's assuming it could even hit him. But mere energy guns and such weapons, too weak. Lin waved his hand, and a pillar of light formed from holy light appeared in his hand, sweeping across the building. Screech. Like a giant weapon, it cut a gap in the building. Lin could manipulate holy light at will, transforming it into various weapon forms for attack, which was just one of its uses, and currently Lin's favorite attack method. The next instant, the pillar of light formed by holy light dissipated, and Lin suddenly looked up. He saw several armed helicopters appear in midair, firing several missiles at Lin in the sky. Lin's expression was playful, very grateful to the military for sending him big rockets. The more weapons the military displayed, the more fear he instilled in the soldiers, and the more deeply ingrained his invincible image became in their minds. Lin's thoughts shifted, and several beams of holy light condensed behind him, shooting towards the missiles like sharp arrows. Boom! Boom! A cloud of fire appeared in midair, but Lin remained completely unharmed. Looking at the expressionless Lin, the soldiers felt as if Lin at this moment was a god high above, looking down on them. The next instant, Lin flew directly towards the Pentagon, leaving a hole in the wall before disappearing from all the soldiers' sight. Quick! Stop him! Stop who? Before the words even finished, Lin had already blasted open the door and appeared in the war room. Lin slowly walked into the war room, his eyes calmly sweeping over the terrified faces. No Stryker. Where is Stryker? Lin asked, puzzled. The military high-ranking officials in the war room looked at Lin, their eyes full of fear. What exactly do you want to do? A general calmed down and asked Lin. Lin looked at the general who spoke, his expression a little surprised. It was even an acquaintance, General Ross. Do I need to repeat myself? Lin coldly swept his gaze over everyone. General Ross said in a deep voice, Stryker is not here. Lin nodded. Hand him over, or I'll tear this place apart. You. General Ross suppressed his anger and said to Lin, you are making an enemy of the entire nation. Lin chuckled mockingly. Didn't you all push me to be an enemy of everyone a long time ago? Shouldn't you be happy that I've become what you expected? Happy. Happy my foot. If they had known Lin Crete's power was so terrifying, they would never have agreed to Stryker's plan. Now Lin Crete had come knocking, but that fool Stryker was hiding like a coward, afraid to come out. General Ross's eyes shifted, and he sighed helplessly. Stryker really isn't here. I know. Lin shrugged, saying calmly, but that's none of my business, that's your problem. Listening to Lin's overbearing words, the military's high-ranking officials dared not express their anger, but they felt somewhat uneasy inside. Just then, Lin suddenly turned around and raised his hand, sweeping it behind him. Bang! The impact generated by the colliding fists sent everything in the conference room flying. Lin looked at the monster that had suddenly appeared in front of him, his eyebrows raising slightly. Alien. The alien that appeared before him was only 50% similar to a regular alien, overall appearing somewhat smaller than a regular alien, about the size of an ordinary human. Its head extended backward, like a streamlined bone helmet, shorter than a regular alien's. Its body and limbs, however, were more human-like, only covered in a dark black exoskeleton, and it had a slender tail. This appearance of the alien was 80% similar to a certain image in Lin's memory. Lord Frieza. Frieza's third form flashed through Lin's mind, his expression somewhat complex, with a feeling that the other party might shout, my power level is 100 times yours, at any moment. His eye twitched, and he saw the alien open its mouth at him. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Piercing sound waves shot towards Lin's head like cannonballs. Lin frowned in pain, punching the alien's face. But the alien flickered and vanished from Lin's front, and then a dangerous sensation came from behind him. Teleportation. Bang! Lin crashed through the wall behind him like a cannonball, disappearing from the war room. The alien flickered, teleporting in front of Lin again, and once again opened its mouth. But the next second, a ball of holy light was crammed into the alien's mouth. Bang! The holy light exploded violently, blowing off half of the alien's head, and corrosive acid blood splattered the central courtyard of the Pentagon. Numerous soldiers, suppressing their fear, were running into the building. But the next second, accompanied by the sound of a wall exploding, a pitch-black figure flew out from behind the shattered wall. No, to be precise, it was punched away by someone. It was a xenomorph. Although the xenomorph's sudden display of superpowers surprised Lin, Lin quickly adjusted and demonstrated an overwhelming advantage. Whoosh! Lin appeared beside the blasted xenomorph at an extremely fast speed, clasping his hands together and smashing down like a large hammer. But the xenomorph's figure contracted into a point, suddenly disappearing from in front of Lin. The next instant, it appeared above Lin's head, and a long, serrated tongue shot out towards Lin's head. Lin didn't even turn his head, but accurately caught the incoming tongue with a backhand. The xenomorph let out a painful hiss, its tongue gripped tightly in Lin's hand, and then a ball of holy light, like a sharp blade, sliced off the upper half of its head. Hey! Lin chuckled lightly, casually tossing the xenomorph's body to the ground. Boom! The xenomorph's body hit the ground with a thud, as if striking everyone's heart, causing their hearts to involuntarily contract. They looked at Lin as he slowly descended, a deep sense of awe rising in their hearts. This was awe of power, awe of the cruelty Lin had suddenly displayed. Lin keenly perceived the change in the soldiers' gazes and was very satisfied with it. Unwavering benevolence could only be seen as weakness, it needed to be paired with cruelty to inspire fear. And cruelty was the second component Lin was building for his image as a god. This was not in conflict with benevolence. Lin shook off the acidic blood from his hands and slowly descended to the ground. The xenomorph was not yet dead, even such a fatal wound was only a minor injury for this particular xenomorph. If he hadn't guessed wrong, this should be the xenomorph emperor mentioned in the alien island data. By having xenomorphs absorb host DNA and evolve, they could parasitize mutants, collect various mutant abilities, and then, after repeated screening, obtain a master xenomorph. Afterward, new mutant abilities only needed to be added to this master xenomorph to produce various xenomorphs. Because these xenomorphs were much stronger than ordinary super-powered xenomorphs, Stryker named them Xenomorph Emperors. And this Xenomorph Emperor in front of him had already displayed several abilities. Teleportation, sonic attacks, super strength, and rapid self-healing, plus the Xenomorph's original hunting abilities, corrosive acidic blood. Such a xenomorph was a perfect killing machine, just one could kill all the soldiers in the central courtyard. Truly formidable. Lin praised in his mind. If such monsters were mass-produced and their hunting target was mutants, it might really be possible to wipe out the mutants. A thought flashed through Lin's mind, only to see the xenomorph, missing half its head, actually climb up from the ground, restoring its head while attacking Lin. Teleportation. Teleportation. The xenomorph continuously used its teleportation ability, appearing around Lin like a phantom. But it knew that close-quarters combat was no match for Lin, so it adopted an attack method that even surprised Lin. Splashing acidic blood. With each teleportation, it would splash a glob of acidic blood at Lin. In the blink of an eye, a yellowish-green blood curtain of acidic blood formed, crashing towards Lin. While Lin was surprised by the xenomorph's intelligence, he found this attack method amusing. Had it run out of tricks? Too bad, it was still useless against him. These acids simply could not corrode a body protected by Cosmo power. Puff, puff, puff. Puffs of corrosive smoke rose from Lin's body, his clothes were badly corroded by the acidic blood. He simply tore off his clothes, revealing a perfectly sculpted physique, and then, as the xenomorph teleported again, guided by his battle intuition, he accurately appeared at the xenomorph's destination, catching its newly reformed spine the instant its body finished reassembling. This teleportation ability truly had a huge flaw. Lin pulled hard, tearing the xenomorph's spine from its body. This cruel scene made the surrounding soldiers feel a chill throughout their bodies. If Lin had treated them that way just now, Just thinking about it, they actually felt a hint of benevolence. Hiss. The xenomorph screamed in pain, collapsing to the ground like a puddle of mud. Even so, it still wouldn't kill it. Given enough time, it could still recover. Truly tenacious vitality. Lin sighed, began to mobilize the power of Cosmo, and used one of the basic abilities of a saint. Supersonic punch. Lin continuously swung his fists, but his fists seemed to disappear into the air, with only storm-like impacts constantly blasting the xenomorph. Under such an attack, the xenomorph had long been completely torn to shreds, but Lin still didn't stop. This cathartic attack continuously destroyed the ground, as if to tear the entire earth apart, and the ground began to tremble violently. Cracks rapidly spread outwards from where Lin's fists landed, like a spiderweb covering the central courtyard. Suddenly, Lin stopped, and everyone looked at the ruined central courtyard, their eyes filled with deep awe and fear. Lin looked up at the sky, and upon seeing two Quinjets land in the central courtyard, a smile appeared on Lin's face. They finally arrived, otherwise he would have had to demolish the Pentagon to finish this. The two jets quickly descended, and the first to emerge was a gleaming bald head. Nick Fury. This guy had a lot of guts. Lin raised an eyebrow, then turned to look at the other Quinjet. Captain America, Bruce Banner, and Hawkeye. 3 Avengers, they thought too little of him. Oh, right. Tony, as Iron Man, was still toiling in the sanctuary, completely unaware of what was happening here. Nick Fury surveyed the surroundings, marveling at Lin's destructive power, but then suddenly realized there were hardly any corpses, only some injured, wailing people. It seemed Lin Crete was not a bloodthirsty person, or rather, a god. He had already learned Lin's identity from Captain America. Son of Zeus, Lin Crete. Nick Fury's heart settled. Several thoughts flashed through his mind as he calmly walked towards Lin with his hands raised. I'd like to talk to you. Mr. Crete, or would you prefer I call you Son of Zeus? Son of Zeus. All the soldiers were startled, looking at the calm-faced Lin. Son of Zeus. He was the son of Zeus. A god. The Pentagon's central courtyard was dead silent. All the soldiers looked at Lin, their eyes filled with disbelief and shock. Nick Fury continued, Mr. Crete, as the son of Zeus, you are truly too merciful. He pointed a finger at the central courtyard, which was completely destroyed. Judging by the power you displayed, you could have killed everyone here before the Avengers and I appeared, but from my rough observation, it seems only a few people were injured. Hearing Nick Fury's words, all the soldiers were stunned. They looked at the people around them. Indeed, even after such an intense battle, only a few of them were injured. Even the soldier who used a grenade to blast Lin was only severely injured, not dead. They recalled the power Lin had just displayed in battle. Killing them would have been effortless, wouldn't it? As soon as they thought of this, their gazes towards Lin gradually became grateful. After Lin felt the power of faith from these soldiers, his gaze towards Nick Fury became serious. What a clever man. Lin praised him silently. Everyone said Nick Fury was insidious, but no one ever said Nick Fury was stupid. This guy could always precisely find the breakthrough point of an issue and utilize every advantage at his disposal to resolve it. Dealing with such a person, when you are at a disadvantage, it would be quite uncomfortable, because the other party would suppress you in all aspects, even using you as a tool. But when your strength far surpasses the other parties, they would change their way of interacting with you, even making you feel very comfortable, because favors and value become the tools for their interaction with you. And behind Nick Fury's almost ruthless exterior, there was a rare hint of sincerity reserved for a very few people. A smile appeared on Lin's face, and he said to Nick Fury, what do you want to talk about with me? Let's talk about what you want. Nick Fury said, stopping after reaching a spot where Lin could easily attack him, then continued, let's talk about why you were so enraged, esteemed son of Zeus. As he said this, he suddenly raised his voice, immediately causing a buzz of discussion among the soldiers. Lin's eyebrow twitched slightly, and he said, I already said it when I came here. Nick Fury's face was full of apology. I apologize, they didn't know your identity, so there was some offense. He righteously guaranteed Lin, I promise. I promise to help you get what you want. How about we sit down and talk? Give them a chance. Lin smiled faintly and walked up to Nick Fury, a trace of Cosmo power quietly spreading out. Immediately, Nick Fury felt a terrifying pressure, as if a violently burning universe, ready to destroy everything at any moment, had appeared before him. A layer of cold sweat appeared on Nick Fury's head, and his body even trembled slightly. This was not about courage, it was the pressure brought by the difference in life levels. Lin suddenly chuckled. All right, I'll give you face, and give them a chance to keep their lives. He hadn't intended to kill those people anyway, and it was a good opportunity to give Nick Fury face, making it easier to ask for his help in the future. Nick Fury let out a long breath and praised loudly again, "You are truly too merciful." Although he didn't understand why Lin, the son of Zeus, hadn't killed these soldiers, since he had discovered this, mercy, then flattering him profusely was the right thing to do. Steve, accompanied by Bruce Banner, walked up to Lin, a complex expression on his face, momentarily unsure how to speak. Bruce Banner, on the other hand, made no secret of his disgust for the military, gently patted Lin's shoulder, and whispered, "Buddy, their actions are truly disgusting, I support you." Banner. Steve gave Banner a helpless look. Hee hee. Banner shrugged, winked at Lin, and closed his mouth. Lin nodded to Steve and Banner, and said to Nick Fury, "I'm in a hurry." Nick Fury said to Lin, "Please follow me." This time, Lin was invited in by the military's high-ranking officials under the awe-filled gazes of the soldiers. Even though the military's high-ranking officials were still skeptical about Lin's identity as the son of Zeus, with Stryker gone, sitting down to talk was the best solution at the moment. And when both parties sat down, Lin put forward his demands. Find and hand over Stryker. Stop slandering him and issue an official clarification. Hearing Lin's demands, the military personnel breathed a sigh of relief. It was just a Stryker, it wasn't a big price to pay. As for the clarification method, since they had already decided to abandon Stryker, it was only right for Stryker to take some blame. There's one more thing. Lin's tone shifted, making everyone's hearts tighten. I want to help you solve the mutant problem, you need my help. Looking at the smiling Lin, they thought they had misheard. They needed Lin's help. A thoughtful look flashed in Nick Fury's single eye, he felt this was Lin's true purpose. Why would Lin do this? Nick Fury was a little curious, but he didn't ask, because he knew someone else would. Sure enough, a general from the military asked in confusion, "How do you intend to solve the mutant problem?" Perhaps they could use this as a condition to get some benefits from this son of Zeus. You don't need to worry about that, I'm just informing you, how you act is actually not important. Lin said calmly. He was just giving these people a heads up, indicating that he would pay attention to the mutant community, so that these people would have some reservations when encountering mutant issues that needed to be resolved. General Ross suddenly spoke, then, how do you prove your identity? Son of Zeus. This was the basis of this conversation, and also the basis for the military agreeing to hand over Stryker and issue a clarification. After all, losing to a god was not shameful, and even cooperating with a god was considered an honor in the eyes of most people. But the premise was, you truly are a god. Lin's lips curled slightly. Tomorrow, people from Olympus will arrive, and you will see the evidence you want. Tomorrow. People from Olympus. Everyone's hearts jumped. They wanted to ask for more details, but found that Lin had already left. In Stryker's secret base. Stryker repeatedly watched the footage of Lin fighting the alien, his face as dark as water. This footage was from the alien's perspective, so he could better appreciate Lin's power. Mutant. Son of Zeus. Ridiculous. Stryker sneered, he would never believe that this mutant was the son of Zeus. Even if he truly was a god, Stryker, pushed to the brink, would not stop. Moreover, if he really killed a god, wouldn't that mean his biological weapons were more powerful than a god? A hint of madness flashed in Stryker's eyes. New York, Manhattan. On the empty lot after the Crete clinic disappeared. The righteous people who had surrounded the clinic had quietly dispersed. Conversely, those who supported the clinic and regarded Lin as their savior still lingered near the clinic. Eric was one of them. He stood in an inconspicuous corner, waiting silently, although he couldn't be sure if Dr. Lin would ever appear again. His abilities are too strong and too comprehensive. If Dr. Lin were to join the Brotherhood. As soon as he thought of this, Eric's heart warmed. After witnessing Dr. Lin relocate an entire building, Eric, who had initially only wanted to help Lin, also developed the idea of inviting Lin to join the Brotherhood. But he ultimately didn't wait for Lin to return, because Sentinel Services found him. Eric couldn't help but curse under his breath. Although he knew there would be a risk in appearing near the Crete clinic again, he hadn't expected Sentinel Services to have set up a net centered around the Crete clinic. Even after discovering him, they didn't immediately move to apprehend him. Instead, they only began to close the net once they were sure they could capture him. Those sons of fools. Eric cursed inwardly, searching for an escape route. And just as Eric was searching for a route, Sentinel Services had already surrounded him. Jess Turner was still leading the team. The detective, who had been outmaneuvered by Lin, was in charge of the operation. He looked at Eric in the distance, pressed his communicator, and said coldly, "Catch him. He's about to run. Be careful of his abilities." The Brotherhood was a mutant organization that had only appeared in the last 6 months. In these 6 months, the Brotherhood had been targeting Sentinel Services, and many conflicts had already occurred. Some time ago, due to the continuous attacks on Sentinel bases, when the Brotherhood launched an attack on one base, Sentinel Services finally caught a small tail of the Brotherhood's leader. In that operation, the Brotherhood's mutants took a chip from the Sentinel base. To protect that chip, the Brotherhood's people fought Sentinel Services several times, even sacrificing several mutants. As Jess Turner's order was given, Sentinel Services sprang into action. Knowing their opponent, as a special service agency targeting mutants, they naturally formulated a capture plan specifically for Eric. Specialized bullets, specialized weapons, and some specialized mechanical spiders. No one involved in the operation wore anything containing metal. Metal manipulation. Hey! Jess Turner sneered. It was precisely because of these specialized weapons and equipment that they were able to injure the Brotherhood's mutant leader. If it weren't for Lin Crete, the mission would already be over. Jess Turner couldn't help but curse under his breath. At this moment, as the net set by Sentinel Services began to tighten, the two sides finally began a direct confrontation, and the scattered crowd that had been lingering nearby screamed and ran into the distance. Those weapons. Eric awkwardly hid behind the remains of a building, listening to the sound of bullets hitting the cover, feeling a bit anxious. He was being targeted. His abilities had no effect on these weapons. He stretched out his hand towards the distant building wreckage. Some metal, along with the building wreckage, flew towards where the bullets were coming from, smashing towards Sentinel Services. Immediately, the fierce firepower significantly weakened. Eric took a deep breath and rushed out of cover. But as soon as he moved his feet, a mechanical spider, half a person's height, pounced on him. The firearms on the mechanical spider's back fired a series of bullets at him, forcing him back to his original position. Eric was extremely anxious. Last time, he had been defeated by these spiders. He manipulated some metal to fly towards that spider, but the spider moved too fast. The metal he threw out by feel couldn't hit the mechanical spider at all. And there were 8 such mechanical spiders. Eric's eyes filled with unwillingness and despair. His abilities were still too weak. Compared to other mutants, his mutant ability had awakened too late. He awakened his ability a year ago, on the night his wife and 5-year-old son were killed. That day he shouldn't have taken his family to the movies, nor should he have walked down that alley. As a middle-class man, he had originally lived a happy life with a perfect family. But everything was destroyed by those 2 robbers. His wife and son died by gunfire. In his rage, he awakened his abilities and killed the 2 robbers on the spot. But ironically, because he awakened his abilities and became a mutant, from that day on, he became a mutant criminal who killed humans, beginning a long life of escape. And during his days on the run, he met many mutants and witnessed their tragic plight, so he formed the Brotherhood, wanting to unite all mutants who could be united to fight against Sentinel Services and all forces that wanted to persecute mutants. Today, will everything end? Bang bang bang. Gunshots rang out continuously, and his mind was somewhat dazed, as if he had returned to that night, seeing the tragic death of his wife and son. No. Absolutely not. Eric's eyes turned red. Under intense anger, his mutant ability began to run wild, and a large amount of metal flew out from the surrounding ruins, rising into the air under his control. For a time, the metal flying in the air gave people the illusion of covering the sky. Seeing this scene, Jess Turner was startled. Temporarily retreat, and the long-range team prepare for sniping. Capturing the Brotherhood leader alive was naturally the best outcome, but if it meant risking their people being killed by disgusting mutants, he would rather get a corpse. People in the distance looked at the metal moving in the air, their faces full of shock. And Athena, mixed in the crowd, was also a little surprised after seeing this scene. Is this a superhero among humans? The ability is indeed good, and Athena looked at Eric in the distance, her bright eyes flickering. She felt that person had great potential, and manipulating these metals was only part of his ability. So, should she save this person, take him back to Olympus, and let him become her guard? Just as Athena hesitated, the flying metals shot wildly in all directions, shattering all the mechanical spiders into pieces, then, carrying Eric's anger, flew towards Sentinel Services. Kill him! Jess Turner roared. The next second, a specialized sniper bullet flew from hundreds of meters away towards Eric. Athena was startled and was about to make a move when a figure suddenly blocked in front of Magneto, grabbing the incoming bullet. It was Lynn. Athena looked at Lynn, surprise flashing in her bright eyes. The same bloodline as me. Just as Athena's gaze fell on Lynn, Lynn also felt a slight tremor deep within his body, a stirring of his bloodline. Lynn sharply turned his head to look. The next moment, their eyes met, and a realization dawned on them simultaneously. She is like me. A smile appeared on Athena's lips as she looked at Lynn with interest. Undoubtedly, this young man before her was like her, both flowing with the blood of Zeus, both children of Zeus. So, this was her father's bloodline left on Earth. Then her real father was on Earth. A series of thoughts flashed through Athena's mind, and she smiled and nodded at Lynn. Lynn was stunned. Although he had many questions, now was clearly not the time to talk. However, judging by her appearance, she seemed to be here for him too. But weren't the stars of authority supposed to condense tomorrow? A thought flashed through Lynn's mind. He casually dropped the special bullet in his palm and said to Eric, "We meet again, Eric." Eric glanced at the bullet on the ground, and his anger was doused like cold water. Almost. His head was almost blown off. And this was the second time. He had been saved by Lynn twice. Jess Turner looked at Lynn in the distance, a cold glint in his eyes. It's him again. Should we continue the attack? Attack. Take them all out. Jess Turner gave the order. This was a great opportunity, a chance to take out both mutant criminals at once. He had a feeling that if he gave up this time, such a good opportunity would not come again. As he gave the order, gunshots rang out again, and the snipers in the distance once again aimed at Lynn and Eric, 300 meters away. Eric, hiding behind cover, saw Lynn still standing there and couldn't help but remind him, "Be careful, I can't control these bullets." Lynn responded indifferently, but didn't even move. He simply used Saint Light to form a light shield, enveloping Eric. Bang bang bang. Bullet after bullet landed on the Saint Light shield, but only caused the light shield to deform slightly. Eric watched this scene and quietly breathed a sigh of relief. The next moment, Lynn used his sixth sense to pinpoint the location of every gunman, and then Saint Light arrows appeared behind him, only to abruptly vanish. All the gunshots suddenly stopped. Athena, watching from a distance, had a strange look in her eyes. Why did this ability resemble Apollo's? Was there an overlap in talents? She stood there pondering. Eric, however, was stunned by the sudden turn of events and asked in surprise, "You killed them?" In his eyes, Dr. Lin was a superhero. "I gave them a chance, more than once," Lin said indifferently, his body abruptly disappearing from in front of Eric. Just as Eric was wondering, Lin reappeared in front of him, carrying a pale-faced man, and threw him at Eric's feet. Jess Turner. When Lin's light arrow shot towards him, he inexplicably moved a step, and the light arrow, which should have pierced his heart, only shot through his chest. Looking at the agent who had hunted him for so long and almost killed him twice, Eric's eyes flickered. He squatted down expressionlessly and grabbed Jess Turner by the collar. "How do you use the chip to control the Sentinel?" "Control the Sentinel." Jess Turner coughed violently, spitting out a lot of blood, but a look of mockery appeared on his face. "Do you really think such a thing would be easily obtained by you? Ha ha ha. That's just a special tracker." Hearing this, Eric's mind instantly went blank. If it was a tracker, what about the Brotherhood members who died protecting the chip? What about their experiences during this time? Impossible. It was clearly sealed in a safe, and those documents clearly stated it was a Sentinel controller. That's just a trap for mutants, ha 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 ha. Jess Turner laughed heartily, more and more blood spilling from his mouth, but he stared at Eric with an extremely mocking gaze until he completely stopped breathing. Impossible. It's impossible. Eric roared. Are you talking about this? Lynn flipped his palm, took a paper bag from his inner world, and tossed it to Eric. Eric tremblingly took it, poured the chip out of the bag, then crushed it to dust with force. I killed them, Eric said painfully, and the surrounding metal began to tremble again. Clearly, his emotions were once again on the verge of losing control. Lynn looked at Eric, feeling that this Eric was truly too immature compared to the older version of Magneto in his memory. But precisely because of this, Eric seemed more vibrant. Lynn gently patted Eric's shoulder and said helplessly, didn't you ever consider that he was lying to you? Just to make you destroy that thing. To make you destroy that thing. A gentle yet powerful voice overlapped with Lynn's. Lynn raised an eyebrow, looking at the woman who had walked up to him. Who are you? You must feel it too, right? That's the connection between bloodlines. Athena carefully scrutinized Lynn with her bright eyes. You should call me Big Sister. Lynn narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, then, Big Sister, could you tell me your name? Judging by her current attitude, she probably wasn't here to fight him. Since that was the case, calling her Big Sister wouldn't hurt, and she was indeed his big sister. Athena was startled for a moment, then a smile appeared on her face. You're much more interesting than those idiots whose heads are only filled with women or blacksmithing. Is that so? Lynn looked at Athena sincerely. I think you are the most beautiful goddess I have ever seen. Is that because you've only seen me? Athena unceremoniously exposed Lynn's little lie, but then changed the subject, but what you said is indeed correct. I am Athena. Athena. Lynn's heart skipped a beat, and the corner of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Did this mean the true owner of the saints had come knocking? Athena was a little puzzled by Lynn's reaction, but then Lynn's talent issue flashed through her mind. Just as she was about to ask, Eric came back to his senses and looked at Lynn gratefully. You're right. He must have been lying to me. Athena looked at Eric with some displeasure. She had reminded him too, so why didn't he thank her? If it weren't for the fact that she thought Eric had good potential. Lynn blocked Athena's line of sight and smiled. Big sister, shall we talk? Eric was a believer he valued. Don't even think about him. Noticing Lynn's movement, Athena paused, her expression turning playful as she looked at Lynn. Since it's someone you fancy. Wait, what do you mean? Don't be afraid, we on Olympus are very open-minded in that regard. You really shouldn't talk anymore. Lynn glared at her, then waved his hand at the distant air, and the vanished Crete clinic reappeared in the clearing. What kind of ability is this? Eric couldn't help but ask. I'll tell you when we have time. Lynn said calmly, then turned to Athena, shall we talk? Athena nodded. That's precisely why I came here. The two walked into the clinic, and just as Eric hesitated whether to follow, Lynn called back to him, you come too. Oh. Eric responded and quickly followed. He was indeed very curious about Lynn. Not only was he curious about Lynn's abilities, but also about Lynn's identity. Athena, Olympus, could it be that Lynn is a god of Olympus? Eric's heart skipped a beat. Not long after the three entered the clinic, Sentinel Services personnel appeared nearby, but this time they weren't there to capture mutants, but to collect bodies. Because they had received orders from high-ranking military officials, they left without delay after collecting the bodies. Clinic, second floor. After Lynn invited Athena and Eric to sit down, he casually asked, what would you like to drink? Water. Wine. Athena said with great gusto, her eyes scanning the wine cabinet on the second floor. Eric hesitated for a moment, then changed his mind. Please give me a glass of wine too. Lynn shrugged, took a bottle of wine from the cabinet, and walked to the coffee table with 3 glasses, pouring a drink for each of them. Athena took a sip. The taste isn't bad. With that, she looked at Lynn and asked directly, where is father? Isn't he on Olympus? Lynn's eyes flickered as he probed. Athena glanced at Lynn and said calmly, don't test me, just ask what you want to ask directly. She gently swirled her wine glass, her voice lowering. I'm asking about my real father, the one on Olympus, hey. Athena chuckled faintly, a hint of disdain in her eyes. So, there's a fake Zeus on Olympus. Lin continued to ask, what happened? Go ask father yourself. Athena pushed the question back. She downed the rest of the wine in her glass. It's my turn to ask you, where is father? She wanted to see Zeus and ask him what his plans were. I don't know. Lin spread his hands, telling Athena, he should have sensed your arrival. If he wants to see you, he will definitely appear. Although Athena agreed with Lin's answer, she was somewhat displeased. So, she frowned and asked again, what is your talent? What authority did father bestow upon you? Lin refilled Athena's glass and smiled. What my talent is, I should know once the star of authority appears. As for bestowing authority upon me, what else could he bestow? Athena thought seriously for a few seconds. Cleaning. Lin's face darkened. Seeing the slight curve of Athena's lips, he realized she was just teasing him. Eric listened to their conversation, pouring wine for them, as if he had become a sommelier. Although some of Lin and Athena's words were vague and he didn't understand their meaning, he finally confirmed Lin's identity. Athena chuckled softly, then suddenly asked, is father happy here? From my perspective, he should be happy. Lin said with a smile. Athena nodded, then asked again, did he say when he's returning to Olympus? I can hardly stand that idiot anymore. Lin spread his hands, helplessly saying, sister, I only learned his identity a short while ago. Besides that, he didn't tell me anything. Is that so? He didn't tell you anything. Athena paused, her tone surprisingly melancholic. The less one knows, the less one has to bear. She couldn't help but ask, has he lived with you as an ordinary father all your life? As she spoke, undisguised envy and jealousy appeared on her face. Jealousy. Lin was a little confused, wondering if Athena was acting. Looking at Lin's expression, Athena already had her answer. She said leisurely, you don't really think I literally sprang from his head, do you? That's just a story invented by mortals, little brother. Legend has it that Athena was born fully armed from Zeus's cracked skull. Lin gave an awkward smile and asked curiously, how did you find me? The star of authority had not yet condensed. Olympus shouldn't have known about him, otherwise that Zeus of Olympus would have sent people long ago. If I said it was just a coincidence, would you believe me? I believe you. Lin nodded, then suddenly said with a serious expression, are you representing Olympus? No, I didn't expect to actually meet you. Athena sighed, then continued, others will come tomorrow. Seeing Lin's solemn expression, she comforted him, no matter who comes, you will undergo a trial. They won't kill you during the trial. Depending on who comes, the method of the trial will also differ. However, when they invite you back to Olympus, no matter what reason they give, do not go for now. Athena offered some advice. Although Lin had no intention of going to Olympus anyway, he still thanked Athena, accepting her goodwill. The two chatted casually, about Olympus, about Earth, and about interesting experiences they each had. Eric listened quietly from the side. He admitted that the stories about Olympus they told were interesting, but he wasn't staying there to listen to gossip. He looked at Lin and sighed inwardly. There was no need to mention inviting him to join the Brotherhood. Lin was an Olympian god, and he didn't think a god would join his small mutant organization. Just then, Lin suddenly said, Eric, there's something I want to talk to you about. Eric paused. Now. Before he finished speaking, Athena gulped down the remaining half glass of wine and smiled at the two. I won't interrupt your time together. Lin's mouth twitched as he said to Athena, it's not what you think. What do I think? Athena blinked in confusion, then lightly patted Lin's shoulder. Little brother, we are Olympian gods, be a little bolder. With that, without waiting for Lin to speak, Athena happily left the clinic. Lin hadn't yet been corrupted by Olympus, so he was perfect for teasing. Just as she walked dozens of meters away from the clinic, she suddenly felt the connection with Lin disappear, as if it had instantly exceeded the range of bloodline sensing. It seems my little brother has many secrets. Athena's lips curled slightly. Athena. Suddenly, a majestic voice echoed in her mind. Father. In a coffee shop near Crete Clinic. Zeus and Athena sat opposite each other at a coffee table near the window. After the waiter brought them 2 cups of coffee, they both silently, yet in unison, kept adding sugar, as if competing. Only after the jar of sugar cubes was finished between the father and daughter did they carefully take a sip of their coffee. Phew. Zeus felt the sweetness bloom on his tongue, let out a comfortable breath, and said to Athena, "You saw Lin?" Athena nodded, then suddenly asked, "You care about him a lot?" "I care about every one of my children," Zeus said with a smile. Athena stared at Zeus and shook her head. "It's not the same. Your attitude towards him is different from your attitude towards us." According to her casual chats with Lin, when Lin was a child, Zeus actually went to parent-teacher conferences, took Lin to amusement parks, and even more excessively, he still made breakfast for Lin even now. Athena stated that she wasn't jealous at all. "Really?" Zeus said indifferently, "You are all gods who have lived for at least 1,000 years. He is still just a child, not to mention he was immortal a month ago." Hearing this, Athena whispered, "Blatant favoritism." In her memory, Zeus had never treated any other child the way he treated Lin, not even her, who was deeply trusted by Zeus. Zeus tapped the empty sugar jar with his spoon and said indifferently, "Do you know what Lin would do when I add sugar?" Before Athena could answer, a smile appeared on Zeus's face. "He would watch me add it with a smile, warn me that it's not good for my health, and then take the sugar jar away." Athena was stunned. "Is that so?" Zeus changed the subject, asking, "How is Olympus now? It's only been a few decades, nothing much has changed, but your reputation has gotten worse." At this point, Athena laughed without giving Zeus any face. Zeus shook his head, not particularly bothered. After all, his reputation had never been very good. But Athena was somewhat surprised by Zeus's reaction. The old Zeus would have been furious by now. "You're different from before," Athena couldn't help but say. Hearing this, Zeus didn't retort, just smiled faintly. Living as a mortal on Earth for decades, there are bound to be some changes. Athena couldn't help but say, "Don't you want to reclaim your authority? Don't you want to rule Olympus again? Aren't you angry about their actions? You." She couldn't fathom what Zeus was thinking now. Zeus just smiled at this. When he was the king of the gods, he always handled everything from Zeus's perspective. What he said, what he did, was the truth. No one could defy him, and no one dared to defy him. But in these decades of losing his authority, living truly as a mortal and experiencing all the trivial things, when he looked back at the things King of the Gods Zeus had done, even he himself felt a sense of disgust. Athena looked at Zeus like this, a complex look in her eyes, and couldn't help but ask, "Are you not returning to Olympus?" "Not for now." Zeus slurped his coffee and smiled happily. "I just retired and am about to go traveling with Lin's mother." "Queen." Athena spoke, observing Zeus's expression. When she saw his features visibly stiffen, she secretly chuckled. "If she knows about Lin and his mother, you'll probably have a hard time handling the situation, won't you?" Zeus covered his forehead and sighed deeply. "I hope the worst doesn't happen, otherwise." He paused, then said with an extremely serious expression, "Hera will die." "What?" Athena thought she had misheard. Hera was an Olympian co-ruler who shared power with Zeus. "That's right, Hera will die." Zeus repeated again. Although Freya had never shown him her power, he just had that feeling. Athena suddenly looked at Zeus with pitiful eyes. Zeus's eye twitched. "What kind of look is that?" "Nothing." Athena guiltily averted her gaze, but couldn't help but ask curiously, "What is Lin's talent? What authority did you bestow upon him?" "I am just a mortal now, what can I bestow upon him?" Zeus slowly put down his coffee cup and said to Athena, "If the people of Olympus go too far with Lin tomorrow, intervene." "So that's why you came to see me?" Athena retorted, her displeasure evident on her face. Zeus smiled helplessly and lightly touched Athena's forehead. "He is your brother." Athena lowered her head and softly assented. Zeus looked at Athena's appearance, sighed softly, and said to Athena, "Want to go for a walk together?" "Okay." Meanwhile, in Lin's inner world, sanctuary. After hearing Lin's account, Eric was stunned. A new world. He looked at Lin beside him in disbelief and couldn't help but confirm again, is this a world prepared for mutants? Yes. Lin smiled slightly, pointing to the town being built in the distance. Construction has just begun. This will be the first city in this world, a city belonging to mutants. During this time, with the combined efforts of mutant believers and Tony, The town had already taken shape, at least people no longer had to live in tents. Now is the time when manpower is needed. If you are willing. I am willing. Before Lin could finish, Eric eagerly agreed. This was a temptation that most mutants could not resist. What do you need me to do? What can I do? Eric looked at Lin with fervent eyes. In the years since he awakened his mutant abilities and became a mutant, he had seen too many tragic things happen to mutants. Because he wanted to do something for mutants, he formed the Brotherhood. After forming the Brotherhood, to help more mutants, he led the Brotherhood against Sentinel Services and other organizations. He wanted to protect mutants, to secure their rightful rights, and sometimes he even longed to unite all mutants and establish a mutant nation. But he knew how difficult such a thing was. Yet now, with just a gentle click, his ultimate dream could suddenly come true. What was there to hesitate about? Not to mention Lin had already saved him twice. Lin smiled at Eric. Become my believer, develop more believers, and together build this mutant world. Eric took a deep breath and nodded heavily. My God, Lin, I will not disappoint you. Lin left Sanctuary with Eric and granted Eric free access to Sanctuary. Eric became the fifth person, after Tony, Logan, Raven, and Hank, to have free access to Sanctuary. However, Lin temporarily did not bestow the power seed of Cosmo upon Eric. After all, Eric hadn't done anything beneficial for Sanctuary yet. It's worth mentioning that due to Beast Hank's excellent management during this period, Beast Hank became the third mutant to qualify for cultivating Cosmo, and Lin directly elevated Hank's power to the advanced stage of the fifth sense. Mr. Lin, I will go gather everyone from the Brotherhood right away, they will definitely become your followers. Eric excitedly told Lin. The Brotherhood still had over 20 members. Good. Lin nodded and said to Eric, if you think they are reliable, you can bring them directly into Sanctuary. I understand. Eric responded and then turned and quickly departed. Watching Eric leave, Lin walked to the floor-to-ceiling window on the second floor, looking at the setting sun, already anticipating tomorrow's arrival. Lin was not surprised at all by Eric's decision to join Sanctuary. This was an inevitable outcome. As long as Eric's power was developed, Sanctuary would gain a very formidable combat force. The future of Sanctuary is promising. Lin smiled and sighed, but then remembered the news Athena had brought him today. The Zeus of Olympus is fake. Who is impersonating Zeus, or rather, who has the ability to impersonate Zeus without being discovered by the vast majority of the Olympian gods? As this question surfaced in Lin's mind, the answer was self-evident. Just then, Lin felt some power of faith flowing into Sanctuary. Lin paused, then closed his eyes to sense it. The power of faith was increasing at a slow but steady pace. Daily output increased. As the military starting to act. Lin was a little surprised and took out his phone to search. Sure enough, various negative comments and news about him were decreasing at an astonishing rate. Lin had thought that the military would only act tomorrow, after the Olympians arrived and confirmed his identity. Just then, Lin discovered that videos about him were spreading like wildfire. Those were videos of his battle inside the Pentagon. And judging from the shooting angle, they must have come from soldiers on site. Lin's expression was a little strange. And after he saw the titles of those videos, his expression became even harder to maintain. Son of Zeus Lin. I fought a god and lived. The god left me a permanent mark. The benevolent god. Lin. Benevolent or cruel, Lin, do you truly understand? We offended a god, but the god forgave us. The vast majority of these video titles were positive, and many soldiers even showed off the wounds Lin had left them with bullets, and they were proud of them. No, these news, shouldn't they have appeared after the people from Olympus arrived? Why did they come early? Could it be that the military acted early because those soldiers uploaded the battle videos from the Pentagon? Was it implicitly approved by the military, or were these soldiers just that bold? Lin scrolled through his phone, a little speechless, then chuckled softly. Although there were some discrepancies with his plan, this was not a bad thing. Moreover, most of the soldiers who uploaded the videos had attributed the word, benevolent, to him. Benevolent. Yes, he was very benevolent. He could have killed many, but he didn't kill a single soldier, which, in the soldiers' eyes, naturally qualified as benevolent. And these soldiers were like a seed, playing a very good leading role in this wave of public opinion reversal that swept the entire network. Benevolence. At times, benevolence is the sharpest sword, far more effective than slaughter. Things are progressing very smoothly, even more smoothly than I imagined. Lynn's lips curled slightly. Suddenly, bang! As the window was struck, the smile on Lynn's face instantly vanished. He looked at the black and white little spider clinging to the glass, shaking his head helplessly. Open the window. Gwen gently tapped on the window. Lynn opened the window, and after Gwen climbed in, he said grumpily, I need to put some insect repellent on the windows. Hee hee. Gwen took off her hood and stuck out her tongue at Lynn. Why are you here? Lynn asked casually, and seeing that Gwen's head was covered in sweat, he handed Gwen a cup of water. Gwen drank the water in one gulp, then flopped onto the sofa, letting out a comfortable sigh. I wanted to come see you this morning, but my teacher didn't give me a chance to sneak out. Gwen tossed the empty water cup in her hand, asking as if inadvertently. After hearing that Crete Clinic had disappeared, she wanted to come see it. Brother Lynn, do you need Peter and me to help? Lynn didn't answer, instead asking, Peter. You know each other's true identities now. Gwen nodded and explained, some things happened at school recently. A strange person who looked like a lizard attacked the school. After Peter and I repelled him, we decided to reveal our identities to each other. She paused, catching the tossed cup steadily in her hand. You still haven't answered my question. Lynn smiled and ruffled Gwen's hair. Little girl, you two aren't needed yet. Is that so? Gwen was a little disappointed, muttering softly, are we not good enough? How could that be? Lynn said with an exaggerated expression, of course, it's not yet time for you two superheroes to make an appearance. After all, heroes must appear at the most crucial moment. PFF'd. Gwen happily sat up and said to Lynn, Brother Lynn, you're using that old trick from when I was little to coax me again. Little girl, in my eyes, you've never grown up. Lynn lightly flicked Gwen's forehead, smiling mischievously, still that silly child who secretly ate boogers. Shut up. Gwen angrily threw the cup at Lynn, trying to shut him up. Lynn caught the cup and set it aside. Your dad told me to educate you well. Don't skip classes, don't date early, you're only 14. I didn't. Gwen quickly shook her head. After placing the cup on the coffee table, she put on her mask and hood and quickly walked towards the window. I'm leaving. Go to school on time, don't skip classes. Got it. Nagging old man. If you don't, I'll send your ugly childhood photos to your school. Go to hell. Gwen cursed angrily, then swung away with her web, disappearing from Lynn's sight. Lynn chuckled aloud. Occasionally teasing a child he watched grow up was indeed a happy thing. However, something even happier was about to arrive. Lynn estimated the time for the authority star to condense, a smile gracing his face. Countdown, 15 hours. Olympus Temple. At this moment, a large number of Olympians were gathered in the Olympus Temple. They were all waiting for the newly appeared authority star to condense successfully, adding a new brilliance to the sky of Olympus. It's already in countdown. I'm so curious what talent this new god possesses. Perhaps emotions. Impossible, a god has already awakened the talent. I guess it's weather. I guess it's. Boom. The sudden thunderous roar instantly silenced all discussions. All Olympians looked fanatically at the golden lightning-wrapped cloud that appeared in the Olympus temple. Zeus. 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 Everyone was shouting the king of the gods' name. And with their calls, a golden throne appeared on the lightning-flashing clouds. The next moment, golden lightning streaked through the crowd, condensing into a figure in front of the throne, revealing Zeus's form. This Zeus was corpulent, his face full of arrogance, and he reeked strongly of alcohol. Hick. Zeus burped, his eyes hazy as he slurred, let's see what kind of stuff this new god is. As he spoke, figures appeared below the throne. Those were the gods of Olympus. The Olympians watched this scene, their expressions fanatical as they cheered again. Zeus watched this scene, smiled with satisfaction, and reclined on the throne. Immediately, several goddesses with graceful figures and beautiful faces surrounded Zeus, massaging his back and feet, feeding him wine, and fanning him. At this moment, whether it was the gods of Olympus or ordinary Olympians, everyone was looking at the authority star condensing in the sky. That star, as if knowing everyone was watching it, shone with exceptionally bright light. Seeing this, everyone's expressions were somewhat solemn, and some gods even looked displeased. Because the light of their representative stars was completely overshadowed. Time passed bit by bit, and the star's light grew brighter and brighter, actually overshadowing the light of more and more stars. Immediately, the eyes of the main gods of Olympus, including Zeus, became incredulous. What talent had this newly born god awakened? A moment later. It's about to appear. Zeus suddenly said coldly, his previously hazy eyes having quietly turned stern. He had thought the new god was just a minor character, meant to add some fun to his dull life, but now he realized. They might be the entertainment. As soon as Zeus finished speaking, the highly anticipated authority star suddenly retracted all its emitted light, then transformed into the brightest star in the sky. The brilliance here meant that when everyone looked at the sky, even with countless stars, you would first notice its existence, overlooking the other authority stars. And the moment it formed, the talent and authority represented by this star quietly appeared in the minds of all Olympians and gods. World. Everyone was stunned. The next second. Boom. Blinding golden lightning seemed to lose control, raging throughout the Olympus temple. Zeus was furious to the extreme, and the faces of the gods also became extremely solemn. World. Such a simple 2 words. Completely different from the talents of other gods and those complex authorities, yet everyone present understood the weight of these 2 words. One must know that Zeus's authority was only the sky, all things, thunder, and power. But the talent represented by this star was actually the world. And what did the world represent? Everyone just thought for a moment, then involuntarily swallowed. But weren't the talents and authorities of Olympus already distributed among all the gods? Why would such a significant, even unprecedentedly terrifying talent appear? At this moment, the questions that arose in everyone's minds were more numerous than all the questions they had encountered in their thousands of years of life. But the next second, after sensing some information transmitted by this authority star, their minds went completely blank. Earth, son of Zeus, Crete. Son of Zeus. Everyone's gaze turned to the enraged Zeus, and Zeus himself was also stunned for a moment, then a violent emotion, like a lit wildfire, burned wildly within his body. Even after his authority was taken, he still couldn't find peace. Just as his rationality was almost swallowed, a majestic voice sounded. Zeus, we should first investigate the situation. Hera, the queen of heaven, wearing a crown, slowly walked to Zeus's side and lightly glanced at Zeus. Zeus took a deep breath, forced himself to maintain a shred of rationality, and squeezed out a smile at everyone. Haha, it's my bloodline scattered outside, I had forgotten. His emotionless laughter sent chills down everyone's spines. The appearance of such a powerful god is a good thing for Olympus. I will send people to investigate the situation and then bring him back to Olympus. After Zeus spoke a few words, his mindset quickly adjusted. He took a deep breath, and his thunderous voice resounded in the temple. Celebrate. Olympus. For this, new god. With Zeus's words, all Olympians fell into a frenzy, while the gods standing on the clouds looked at Zeus with solemn eyes, a prophecy about Zeus appearing in their minds. Legend has it that one of Zeus's sons would usurp his position as king of the gods. And would this son of Zeus, who awakened the world talent, be the god from the legend? Golden lightning once again moved within the temple, and the clouds carrying the gods disappeared in the lightning. As the gods disappeared, this celebration, centered on the temple, quickly spread outwards, until the entire Olympus was engulfed in revelry. In contrast, the mood of the gods of Olympus was extremely heavy. Zeus returned to his palace, and just as the gods were speculating how Zeus would deal with it, an extremely strong figure was summoned into the palace by Zeus. Heracles. The gods looked thoughtful, then quietly dispersed. Was Heracles going to carry out this trial? A moment later, after Heracles emerged from Zeus's palace, he walked towards the dimensional teleportation point of Olympus. And after Heracles left Olympus, another god was summoned by Zeus to his palace. He had a handsome face and thick, curly long hair. Although his muscles were equally developed, they were not overly exaggerated like Heracles, but rather appeared very well proportioned. Zeus looked at the man standing before him and said coldly, Apollo, go see what's happening, then find an opportunity, and kill him. Earth, New York Sanctum Rooftop. The Ancient One, dressed in a white robe, gazed into the distance with clear, calm eyes, sensing the anomaly in Earth's magic barrier. One came, then another, and then another. The Ancient One's cool voice had no obvious fluctuations, but it clearly conveyed deep displeasure. She turned to look at Zeus beside her. This is not Olympus, don't forget the gods, agreement. I know, I know. Zeus smiled helplessly. Isn't this a special circumstance? If he hadn't sensed wrong, the people coming to Earth this time were Heracles and Apollo. If it was just a test, only one would come. Zeus's eyes darkened, a hint of coldness flashing within them. The Ancient One glanced at the king of the gods beside her, a smile appearing on her face, carrying a hint of schadenfreude. Are you still not going to intervene? Can your little son handle two main gods and the god of strength? Zeus said indifferently. Don't worry, everything is under control. He had already instructed Athena. With Athena's help, Lin only needed to deal with one. Under control. The Ancient One asked with interest, including your little son's world talent. Zeus's face twitched. You're jealous, yes, jealous. Jealous. The Ancient One made a grasping motion in front of her eyes and smiled. I have already seen the one who will inherit the position of Sorcerer Supreme. I just need to wait. Zeus snorted softly, and after a few seconds of silence, he suddenly said with a playful smile, as Earth's Sorcerer Supreme, are you just going to watch those gods brazenly enter Earth? The Ancient One stared at Zeus with an expressionless face, saying without giving him any face. So, I should first kick you, old man, out. No, don't. I'm just a mortal now. Zeus said brazenly, pointing to the distant sky with a serious expression. I'm talking about those youngsters. If you don't manage them, perhaps more will come, and if they cause any trouble, tisk tisk tisk. The Ancient One stared at Zeus, not saying a word. Zeus's old face flushed. Just consider it a favor. The Ancient One chuckled. You really are biased towards your little son. A hint of warmth appeared in Zeus's eyes. It feels different. The Ancient One smiled and shook her head, forming hand seals in front of her. Golden magic energy, like fireflies, outlined a complex magic array, which the Ancient One gently pushed out. The next moment, the dimensional passage from Olympus to Earth was sealed by her. You're right, we really can't let any more Olympian gods appear on Earth. The Ancient One said faintly. Zeus secretly let out a breath. Thanks. No sooner had he spoken than Zeus's phone suddenly rang. Zeus looked at the number, his expression immediately becoming tense. He hastily answered the phone, his voice involuntarily becoming squeaky. My dear, why are you calling now? Has the test begun? The people from Olympus just arrived on Earth. Then keep an eye on them. If anything unexpected happens, I'll slaughter those rotten gods of Olympus. Zeus's expression seemed to freeze. Seeing the Ancient One looking at him with a strange gaze, he immediately raised his voice, saying with a majestic expression, no need. I won't let Lin suffer any accidents. There was a pause on the other end of the phone, then, okay, husband. I'll be waiting for you in Las Vegas. Good girl. Zeus said, then hung up the phone directly, and said to the Ancient One, then I'll be going first. The Ancient One looked deeply at Zeus. Say hello to Ms. Freya for me, and be gentle with your tone. Before she finished speaking, Zeus had already vanished. Ga 0 days G. At the same time, several transport helicopters flew rapidly from high altitude, heading towards the Crete clinic. Stryker sat in one of the helicopters, his face heavy but with a hint of fanaticism. Under the threat of Lin Crete, the military had already begun to act. It wouldn't take a few days for Lin Crete's reputation to completely reverse, from an evil mutant criminal to a respected son of Zeus. Originally, this was his image recovery plan for the military, but now it was benefiting Lin Crete. Everything can still be salvaged. As long as Lin Crete is killed, and everyone sees the power of the xenomorphs, the xenomorph project can be promoted worldwide. And the xenomorph weapons will become the guardians of humanity. Stryker clenched his fists, the fanaticism in his eyes burning like fire. But he was already deluded. Not to mention whether his xenomorphs could kill Lin. Even if he could kill Lin, he hadn't even thought about the consequences of such a blatant provocation to Olympus. He only knew that this was his last chance. Crete Clinic. Shield and military personnel had arrived near the Crete clinic early. They were all waiting with their own thoughts for the people of Olympus to appear, and had formulated plans for contact with Olympus. The prerequisite was that Olympus would actually send people. They silently added that in their hearts. At this moment, inside the clinic. Except for Thor, the other Avengers were all inside the clinic. Lin, do you really not need our help? Steve asked with a frown. Before Lin could speak, Tony yawned and said, don't mind him, he's stronger than anyone imagines. During this time, he had been immersed in building the base in the sanctum. If it weren't for the people from Olympus coming today, if he wanted to watch Lin fight, he might not have come out. And because of his long absence, Tony's girlfriend, Pepper Potts, had been quite resentful of him lately. Thank you, but no need. Lin said to Steve and the others. I should be able to handle it, and this is Olympus's business. It's best if you don't interfere unless absolutely necessary. The group exchanged glances and nodded. Just then, Lin's eyes flashed, and he said to everyone, he's here. He had already felt the connection from his bloodline. Undoubtedly, the person who came, like him, had Zeus's blood flowing through them. But, who could it be? A string of names flashed through Lin's mind as he stepped out of the clinic. Tony and the other 5 exchanged glances and hurriedly followed him out. Lin walked out of the clinic and had just stopped when he felt the ground shake and heard the explosive sound of footsteps hitting the ground. Someone was rushing towards them. Lin looked in the direction of the sound, only to see a tall figure carrying a divine sword and holding an alloy hammer iron rod rushing towards them. He is Heracles, the god of strength. Lin murmured, a serious expression flashing in his eyes. Thanks for watching.